Chapter 1692. The ancient city covered an area of about 100 miles. Although the tall city walls and majestic buildings were dilapidated, it was not hard to imagine that this place used to be glorious and prosperous. Qin Feiyang controlled the Black Tortoise Realm and entered the ancient city. The dusky ground and the deathly silent city caused this place to seem like it was covered by a mysterious veil, mysterious and unfathomable. After spending less than an hour, Qin Feiyang searched the entire ancient city, but he didn't find a single person. Could it be that they were all in the space divine items? If that was the case, he could use his divine thought to search. However, he had to go out to use his divine thought. Moreover, once he used his divine thought, he would definitely be discovered by Mu Tianyang and the others. What am I thinking? Mu Qing has the omniscient eye. Maybe he has already discovered me when I entered the ancient realm. Qin Feiyang smiled bitterly and left the Black Tortoise Realm. He entered the ancient castle and landed on a street. Boom! His divine thought suddenly appeared and surged in all directions. Soon, a hint of a smile appeared in his eyes. Using the walk formula, he walked to the front of a dilapidated hall. The hall was more than 100 feet tall. Every brick, tile, beam, and pillar was made of high-quality stone. On both sides of the door, there were 2 stone statues of divine beasts. They opened their bloody mouths and revealed their fangs, which was daunting. Although it was dilapidated, it was enough to show that this was once the residence of a big force or a big shot. And in this hall, Qin Feiyang used his divine thought to capture 2 space divine items. He didn't escape. This means that Mu Qing has not discovered me, Qin Feiyang murmured. However, it made sense. Mu Qing could not have opened the omniscient eye to check his location all the time. He did not hide and directly barged into the hall. Inside the hall, the ground was full of holes and the walls were rotten. All kinds of furniture had decayed and the air was filled with a damp smell. Who is it? Suddenly, a cold voice sounded. Then, a black figure rushed out from a room next to him and charged at Qin Feiyang murderously. The corners of Qin Feiyang's mouth lifted and flames rolled out. The dimly lit hall immediately became as bright as day. "It's you, Qin Feiyang!" the black shadow exclaimed. Qin Feiyang also saw the true face of the black shadow. It was a black-robed old man with mottled white hair and a stooped body. However, the aura he exuded was extremely powerful. He was clearly a false god. Qin Feiyang sized up the old man and asked, "Have I seen you somewhere before?" He felt that this person was somewhat familiar. The black-clothed old man's eyes flashed. He turned around and punched out. A large hole immediately appeared in the wall of the hall. Immediately after, he didn't even look back as he flew away. His heart was filled with disbelief. Previously, he had already sensed Qin Feiyang's divine sense. However, he had never imagined that the owner of this divine sense would be Qin Feiyang. I remember now. Qin Feiyang suddenly slapped his head, looked at the black-clothed old man's back, and laughed. "You seem to be an elder of the Nether Palace. I saw you when you came to kill the willow tree." The black-clothed old man did not reply. Qin Feiyang took a step forward and chased after him. Just as Qin Feiyang left, 2 figures appeared out of thin air in the hall. It was the Vice Hall Master of the Nether Palace and the Heavenly Sun Empire's Yen Shenhe. This Qin Feiyang really chased us all the way to the ancient realm. The most unbelievable thing is that he was actually able to cut off his obsession, destroy his inner demons, and break through to become a god. Yen Shenhe looked in the direction where Qin Feiyang disappeared and said in shock, "These are not within my consideration. I only want to know, is it a coincidence that he entered the ancient realm, or is he here to kill us?" The Vice Hall Master said in a deep voice, "If it was a coincidence, then there was nothing to say. But if he deliberately entered the ancient realm, it meant that the giant python and fire dragon had leaked their whereabouts. Otherwise, how would Qin Feiyang know?" Don't worry about that. Elder Xiong escaped without saying a word. He must be trying to buy time for us to escape. Let's go. Yan Shinho said. The Vice Hall Master frowned. Then isn't Elder Xiong doomed? Then what do you want to do? It's better for him to die than for us to be wiped out. Yan Shinho said. Nonsense. Elder Xiong is a member of the Nether Palace. Of course you don't care. If it was someone from the Heavenly Sun Empire, would you still say that? The Vice Hall Master said angrily. What's the point of arguing about this? You're not leaving? I'll leave. Yan Shinho snorted coldly and rushed towards the door. But suddenly, a white figure appeared in front of the door. It was Qin Feiyang. Yan Shinho's eyes widened as he said in shock, Didn't you go after Elder Xiong? Why are you here? Do you think his little tricks can deceive me, Qin Feiyang? Qin Feiyang smiled mockingly as he stepped into the hall and walked towards the two. Yan Shinho and the Vice Hall Master retreated in fear. Qin Feiyang rolled his eyes and looked at the Vice Hall Master. Actually, I don't have any thoughts about the Nether Palace. My target is the Heavenly Sun Empire. Don't listen to him. He's purposely trying to take us down one by one. Yan Shinho hurriedly said, Is that necessary? Qin Feiyang smiled contemptuously and said, Even if all the false gods of your two factions come out, I won't care. Arrogant. Do you think you can do whatever you want just because you've broken through to the false god realm? Die. Yan Shinho was enraged. His aura erupted as he punched towards Qin Feiyang. Ignorant person. Qin Feiyang shook his head as he raised his arm and punched out. Boom! A destructive aura suddenly roared out. The hall was instantly razed to the ground. At the same time, along with a cracking sound, Yan Shinho's arm was crushed on the spot. His entire body was sent flying as blood gushed out from his mouth. How can he be so strong? Yan Shinho's eyes widened in disbelief. The Vice Palace Master was also extremely shocked. One must know, Yan Shinho was a veteran false god and was one of the top 10 existences in the entire Heavenly Sun Empire. Qin Feiyang had just broken through not long ago, but he was able to injure Yan Shinho, a veteran false god? Was this a dream? Yan Shinho stabilized his body and shouted, Vice Hall Master, this kid is too strong. Let's kill him together. However, the Vice Hall Master turned a deaf ear to him and looked at Qin Feiyang. Are you sure you won't attack the Nether Palace? Silly, silly. Don't you know what kind of person Qin Feiyang is? Yan Shinho said angrily. Shut up, the Vice Hall Master shouted. What right do you have to tell me what to do? Qin Feiyang looked at Yan Shinho with a hint of ridicule in his eyes. He looked at the Vice Hall Master and said, Stand aside. Okay. The Vice Hall Master nodded and obediently retreated to the side. I'm so angry, Yan Shinho roared. Qin Feiyang took a step forward and walked towards Yan Shinho with a calm expression. What do you want to do? Yan Shinho hurriedly retreated. Qin Feiyang raised a corner of his mouth and said, My great Qin and your Heavenly Sun Empire are irreconcilable. What do you think I want to do? Boom! His aura was like a rainbow, shocking everyone. Yan Shinho gritted his teeth and activated his battle soul as he madly charged towards Qin Feiyang. A mere ant dares to compete with the sun and moon? Qin Feiyang smiled disdainfully. Boom! Roar! The 9-leaf fire lotus appeared out of thin air. The terrifying divine might was earth-shattering. Boom! Everything within 10,000 miles was destroyed in an instant. Accompanied by 2 deafening explosions, Yan Shinho's battle soul disintegrated on the spot and dissipated in the air. Spurt! Yan Shinho spat out another mouthful of blood. His face was pale. However, at this moment, killing intent flashed in the Vice Hall Master's eyes. He silently approached Qin Feiyang and struck his palm at Qin Feiyang's back. Boom! Qin Feiyang immediately spat out a mouthful of blood and smashed into the ground below. A deep pit appeared immediately. Cracks spread all around like a spider web. Yan Shinho looked at the Vice Hall Master in shock. Do you think I'll believe his nonsense? I pretended to compromise just to find a good opportunity. The Vice Hall Master sneered. Well done. Yan Shinho was overjoyed. He lowered his head to look at Qin Feiyang, only to see Qin Feiyang lying motionlessly at the bottom of the pit with blood flowing out of his back. He's unconscious. This is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Kill him. Yan Shinho shouted. The Vice Hall Master nodded. Boom! Their eyes flashed coldly as they unleashed their most powerful divine techniques again. They charged toward Qin Feiyang with monstrous killing intent. The two divine techniques were extremely terrifying. The ground trembled and the void distorted. Hee! Suddenly a laugh rang in the air. Yan Shinho and the Vice Hall Master's eyes widened as they stared at Qin Feiyang in shock. He didn't faint. Qin Feiyang slowly got up and looked at the Vice Hall Master. He said, Attacking me is the worst choice you've ever made in your life. Looking at Qin Feiyang's eyes, the Vice Hall Master could not help but feel a sense of panic. Qin Feiyang waved his hand, and a divine phoenix soared into the sky to meet the two divine techniques. Fire Phoenix Arts. Boom! The two divine techniques immediately collapsed and were annihilated. Nether Palace, Heavenly Sun, Empire. Today, none of you will be able to leave. Qin Feiyang smiled as the purple gold dragon spirit roared out. Innate divine ability instantly activated. The area within a radius of 10,000 miles suddenly turned into a prison. Yan Shinho and the Vice Hall Master were imprisoned in the void, unable to move at all. A wave of despair that could not be dissipated engulfed their hearts. Yan Shinho's gaze suddenly trembled as he hurriedly shouted, Stop! Mu Tianyang has something to say to you! Even if he has something to say, you have to die. Qin Feiyang smiled and landed in front of Yan Shinho. No, Yan Shinho cried out in despair. Qin Feiyang stretched out his arm. His 5 fingers were like eagle claws as he grabbed Yan Shinho's head and squeezed. Kacha! Yan Shinho's head immediately exploded like a watermelon. Seeing this scene, the Vice Hall Master was scared out of his wits. Just as Yan Shinho was about to die, Mu Qing appeared out of thin air and said angrily, You're too much! Too much? Qin Feiyang smiled and said, I don't know if it's too much or not, but I admire your courage. Although it was Mu Qing who appeared, the voice was Mu Tianyang's. It was obvious. At this moment, the one who occupied Mu Qing's body was Mu Tianyang. Heard. Mu Tianyang raised his eyebrows. Didn't you see that I opened the Emperor prison? I think with your current state, you shouldn't be able to break the Emperor prison. Chapter 1693. I know. When I came out, I didn't think about leaving alive. Mu Tianyang said. You're quite self-aware. Tell me, what do you want to say? Qin Feiyang said. Why did you appear in the ancient realm? Did the giant serpent and fire dragon betray us? Mu Tianyang said in a deep voice. After you left, a lot of things happened. The giant serpent is dead, and the fire dragon can't even protect himself now. Qin Feiyang said. What? Mu Tianyang's eyes trembled. The Vice Palace Master's face also turned pale. Their biggest backers now were the fire dragon and the giant serpent. But they didn't expect that these two backers would collapse. Qin Feiyang said, Didn't the fire dragon send your people to the ancient realm? Didn't he tell you? No, he only said that he would soon soar, and you will soon die in his hands. Mu Tianyang said, Die in his hands? He really knows how to talk big. Even if those things didn't happen, he can't kill me, because the master of the Black Tortoise realm is now me. Qin Feiyang sneered. What? You became the master of the Black Tortoise realm. Their eyes widened in anger. That's right, Qin Feiyang said. How is that possible? The Black Tortoise realm is an independent small world. Even if the fire dragon and the giant serpent can't stop you, the creator won't let you. Mu Tianyang said, there are some things that you won't understand. Let me ask you, when the ancestor entered the divine ruins, did he inquire about the ancient realm? Qin Feiyang said, yes, he did inquire about it. Mu Tianyang nodded. Qin Feiyang hurriedly said, why did he inquire about it? Is there some kind of secret hidden in the ancient realm? I don't know either. We've been in the ancient realm for more than a year, but we haven't found anything out of the ordinary. Mu Tianyang said, could it be that the ancestor was just casually inquiring about it and had no other intentions? Qin Feiyang frowned and fell into deep thought. Mu Tianyang said, there's another question. Speak. Qin Feiyang said, how did you become a god? This was what Mu Tianyang couldn't figure out the most. Because of Qin Feiyang's situation, he knew very well that it was almost impossible for him to become a god. Qin Feiyang said, as I said before, I will open up a new path to godhood. You succeeded? Mu Tianyang was bewildered. Isn't that obvious? Qin Feiyang shrugged. Amazing, truly amazing. To be honest, I really admire you now. To open up a new path to godhood. You're the first person in the world to do so. Mu Tianyang sighed. Qin Feiyang said, you seem to have forgotten someone, Zhuge Mingyang. Zhuge Mingyang, Mu Tianyang muttered, seemingly lost in his memories. After a long while, he looked up at Qin Feiyang and said, you know, there's actually a second way to enter the divine ruins. What is it? Qin Feiyang's gaze trembled, saying, how do you know? Mu Tianyang said, it seems that you've already noticed something from Zhuge Mingyang. What do you mean? Could it be that you also know about Zhuge Mingyang's situation? Qin Feiyang said, this matter, other than Zhuge Mingyang in this world, I'm afraid only your ancestor, and I know the best. Mu Tianyang sighed. What the hell is going on? Who is the person hiding in Zhuge Mingyang's body? Qin Feiyang shouted. Mu Tianyang took a deep breath and said with difficulty, it's not a person, it's a dragon. There was a deep fear in his eyes. Dragon? Qin Feiyang frowned. Yes, his strength is extremely terrifying. The heart of the demon dragon, the eye of the demon dragon, the claw of the demon dragon, the scale of the demon dragon. I think you know about it, Mu Tianyang said. Of course I know. These are all with me now. Qin Feiyang said, the heart of the demon dragon, the eye of the demon dragon, and so on are all parts of the demon dragon's body. Mu Tianyang said, what? Qin Feiyang trembled, physically and mentally. Suddenly, he seemed to think of something and said, I seem to have heard this legend from someone. It is said that the demon dragon has a master called the demon ancestor. This is not a legend. It's true, Mu Tianyang said. Demon dragon, demon ancestor. Qin Feiyang's eyes trembled. The legend turned out to be true. In other words, Zhuge Mingyang is the disciple of the demon dragon. Lin Yi and the mermaid princess are now in the hands of the demon dragon. Qin Feiyang said, I want to know everything about the demon dragon. Everything about the demon dragon, Mu Tianyang murmured and suddenly sneered. Aren't you very smart? Go and check it yourself. Qin Feiyang said, tell me and I will spare your life. Ha! You don't really think that you can kill me, right? Do you really know my means? Mu Tianyang laughed. Qin Feiyang raised his eyebrows. Your ancestor is unprecedented. Have you never thought that if I only have this ability, how can I be a strong opponent of your ancestor? Qin Feiyang. Oh, Qin Feiyang, you are still too young. Mu Tianyang shook his head. Qin Feiyang's heart sank, and an uneasy premonition arose in his heart. All of a sudden, A terrifying aura rushed out from Mu Tianyang's body. As soon as this aura appeared, the world changed color. Accompanied by a series of ear-splitting rumbles, the surrounding earth collapsed crazily. The Emperor prison was also instantly broken. This is the aura of a divine artifact. Qin Feiyang's expression changed, and he quickly retreated. However, only the aura appeared, but Mu Tianyang didn't take out the divine artifact. Mu Tianyang slightly raised the corner of his mouth, looked at Qin Feiyang in ridicule, and asked, "How is this aura? Can it be compared with your castle and Changshui?" Qin Feiyang's face was as calm as water. He didn't know if this aura could be compared with Changshui and the castle, because how strong Changshui and the castle were was still a mystery. But he knew that this aura had already made him feel despair. "Do you know? Your ancestor, Emperor Qin, has a divine artifact with the power of law," Mu Tianyang said. "I know." Qin Feiyang nodded. "How do you know?" Mu Tianyang was surprised. Qin Feiyang said in a deep voice, "I know far more than you think." Mu Tianyang joked. "Then do you know that I also have a divine artifact with the power of law?" "What?" Qin Feiyang's body and mind trembled. This was simply a bolt from the blue. It was too unexpected. Mu Tianyang said, "So it's impossible for you to kill me." Qin Feiyang said, "This aura is released by that divine artifact." "Correct. Well, can we sit down and have a good chat now?" Mu Tianyang said with a smile. Qin Feiyang's eyes flickered, and he suddenly grinned. "What are you laughing at?" Mu Tianyang raised his eyebrows. "At first, I was thinking that it would be too boring to kill you like this. Now, you also have a divine artifact with the power of law. It's more fun to play like this, isn't it? Let me see how powerful that divine artifact is." Qin Feiyang's body shook, and a monstrous divine power erupted. Purple gold dragon Qi emerged, and the divine dragon seal appeared. Seeing this, Mu Tianyang immediately became angry and said, "If you and I fight, both of us will be injured. Is there any meaning? But you also know that there will be a battle between you and me. Cut the crap, kill." Qin Feiyang shouted. The divine dragon seal expanded in the wind, and in an instant it grew to a few hundred feet, shining with divine light, like a huge mountain, and suppressed Mu Tianyang. The Vice Palace Master's pupils shrank, and he quickly retreated. Elder Xiong also returned, and looked at the Vice Palace Master. "What's going on?" The Vice Palace Master said in a deep voice, "This Qin Feiyang's strength has far surpassed ours. Yan Shenhou did not even have the slightest ability to resist, and was directly killed." "What? Yan Shenhou is dead?" Elder Xiong was shocked. "Yes." The Vice Palace Master nodded. "Not only is this kid's methods amazing, even his brain is terrifying. Previously, you wanted to lure him away, but he saw through your intentions and waited outside the door, catching us off guard." The Vice Palace Master said, "Why did we provoke this person?" Elder Xiong sighed, looking at Qin Feiyang, who was standing in the wind with an imposing aura. His old face was filled with fear. In the blink of an eye, the divine dragon seal's aura was monstrous, and it distorted a large area of the void. Mu Tianyang stared at the divine dragon seal, and a bone-chilling cold light flashed in his eyes. "Good. Today, we will settle our grudges here." Mu Tianyang suddenly roared, and a dagger flew out from his body. The dagger was a foot long, and it was blood-red as if it was dyed in blood. As soon as it appeared, the world was shrouded in a bloody mist, and it was filled with an incomparable evil aura. It was as if a peerless demon king was born. However, the strange thing was that the dagger was emitting a pungent stench. This stench was like the smell of feces. Mu Tianyang looked at the dagger, and his expression was extremely respectful. He bowed and said, "Blood dagger, I'll leave it to you." Clang! The blood dagger trembled in the void, and a shocking sharpness appeared, facing the divine dragon seal. Boom! The divine dragon seal shattered on the spot, and Qin Feiyang's body trembled. He retreated continuously, and purple-gold dragon blood flowed from the corner of his mouth. This is that divine artifact. Qin Feiyang stared at the blood dagger, although the blood dagger had a pungent stench, as if it had just been fished out of a cesspool. Its terrifying sharpness was enough to destroy the world. Clang! The blood dagger cut through the sky, and it charged toward Qin Feiyang. The bloody light was surging, and it was full of killing intent. Moreover, Qin Feiyang could feel that the bloody mist released by the blood dagger could not only erode his soul, but also steal the blood in his body. Qin Feiyang took a deep breath, and with a thought, the ancient castle flew out from his glabella. He smiled and said, "It's up to you." Clang! Before he finished speaking, the ancient castle shook violently, and a shocking power spread out. The void cracked, and the sky shattered. The earth also shook violently, and it collapsed. From afar, it was like the scene of the end of the world. Boom! The two divine artifacts collided crazily in the void. They were so fast that even the masters, Qin Feiyang and Mu Tianyang, could not catch them. A destructive aura swept out in all directions. Tens of thousands of miles away were affected. It could be said that the world was destroyed. It can actually collide with the ancient castle. Qin Feiyang was shocked to the extreme. Chapter 1694. At the same time, the deputy palace master and Elder Xiong were also retreating in a hurry. When the two heaven-defying artifacts collided, even with their cultivation, they felt a sense of fear from their souls. Crack! Boom! A series of loud sounds resounded through the clouds. The sky was collapsing and the earth was sinking. Compared to this, the fierce and bloody battles that everyone had experienced in the past were like the difference between heaven and earth. They were not even worth mentioning. The more Qin Feiyang watched, the more incredulous he became. After colliding for so long, Bloodblade was not at a disadvantage at all. Shua! He suddenly retracted his gaze and looked at Mu Tianyang, his eyes flashing with killing intent. Let's not be idle either. Boom! After he finished speaking, he stepped on the walkward and landed in front of Mu Tianyang, throwing a punch. What? Teleport. Mu Tianyang immediately turned pale with fright. In this world, only those who had broken through to the War God realm could control teleportation. But wasn't this Qin Feiyang only a false god? In a flash, he hurriedly mobilized a wisp of divine sense and threw it at Qin Feiyang's fist. At this moment, he was controlling Mu Qing's body. Mu Qing was only a war god. Whether it was his physical body or his battle chi, they were all far inferior to Qin Feiyang. Therefore, he could only use his divine sense to fight. Boom! Qin Feiyang did not dodge at all and punched his divine sense. With a loud bang, his divine sense was annihilated on the spot. However, he was also forced back a few steps. You actually dare to use your divine sense. It seems that after this year, your divine sense has recovered quite a bit. After stabilizing his footsteps, Qin Feiyang sneered and took another step forward, instantly landing behind Mu Tianyang. This is not teleportation. Mu Tianyang's pupils constricted. That's right. This is one of the 6-word divine arts, the walk word. Qin Feiyang sneered coldly. His hand was like an eagle's claw, and the power of the false god filled his fingertips as he reached for Mu Tianyang's head. The terrifying sharpness of his fingertips made Mu Tianyang shiver uncontrollably. The next moment, he decisively left Mu Qing's body and sent Mu Qing into the spatial divine item. Following closely, Mu Tianyang's divine sense turned into a millstone-sized fist and blasted towards Qin Feiyang's big hand. Rumble! The two of them clashed once again. Puff! Qin Feiyang's body shook and he spat out a mouthful of blood. His entire body flew out like a kite with a broken string. His face was full of shock. How was this possible? In the collision just now, he found that the destructive power of his soul awareness was actually several times stronger than the first time. In fact, he even felt as if he had surpassed the level of a semi-divinity. How is it? Mu Tianyang smiled proudly and appeared in the void. Qin Feiyang steadied his footsteps and looked up. He was instantly shocked. He saw a middle-aged man standing in the void opposite him. He was 7 feet tall and had a strong body. He wore a golden robe with a 5-clawed golden dragon embroidered on it. His thick black hair fluttered in the void like an emperor, and his entire body exuded a shocking aura. Qin Feiyang was shocked. It was actually his real body. Could it be that Mu Tianyang had already condensed his divine sense? You must be very surprised. That's right. After entering the heavenly sun empire of the Black Tortoise world, I obtained a large number of divine congealing pills. And after entering the ancient world, the giant python personally helped me condense my divine sense. In addition, my spatial divine item also has a time array, so now I have almost condensed my divine sense. Mu Tianyang said. Almost? In other words, you haven't condensed your divine sense yet. Qin Feiyang frowned. Just one step away. When my face appears, it means that my divine sense has been completely condensed. However, even if I haven't condensed my divine sense yet, my strength is no longer comparable to a false god like you. Mu Tianyang said proudly. Qin Feiyang looked at Mu Tianyang's face. His face was indeed only a vague outline. If his face was removed, Mu Tianyang was now a living person. It's not something a false god like me can compare to, Qin Feiyang murmured. Then I'd like to see how strong you are. Boom! The battle formula was activated. He took a step forward, and the power of a false god roared in all directions as he charged towards Mu Tianyang. Since you want to know, then I'll let you experience it. Mu Tianyang smiled coldly and didn't dodge. He stepped forward and punched Qin Feiyang. Boom! Accompanied by a deafening sound, Mu Tianyang's real body immediately dissipated. He even destroyed 3 strands of divine sense. On the other hand, Qin Feiyang, at this moment he was like a mountain, standing firmly in the void, motionless. So that's all there is to it. Qin Feiyang's face was full of disdain. The battle formula not only gave him an amazing defense, but it also reduced half of Mu Tianyang's attack power. Mu Tianyang condensed his real body again, stared at Qin Feiyang and said word by word, 6-word formula, battle formula. Good eye. If you had already condensed your divine sense, I might have retreated. But unfortunately, your divine sense is still one step away. And it is also this step that will cause your body and soul to be destroyed today. Qin Feiyang let out a loud shout as his aura surged like a rainbow. A purple gold dragon roared out. Roar! A world-destroying sound wave flooded the sky like a torrent of beasts, pouncing towards Mu Tianyang. The second move of the Divine Dragon formula, Divine Dragon Roar. Mu Tianyang's heart was heavy. This time he was indeed too careless. Was Qin Feiyang an ordinary person? Obviously not. Facing this kid, no matter when, he had to be careful and treat him seriously. Huff! Looking at the terrifying sound wave, Mu Tianyang let out a long breath, looked at Qin Feiyang and said indifferently, When I condense my divine sense and return to my divine body, I will fight you. What? You want to retreat? Qin Feiyang raised his eyebrows. This is not called retreating, it's called being tactful. Although I am already very strong now and can kill a pseudo-god, you are an exception. If we continue to fight, the one who will suffer in the end will only be me. However, you don't have to worry, I will call someone out to play with you. Mu Tianyang smiled coldly. Swoosh! The next moment, a middle-aged man in a purple robe appeared in front of him. Mu Tianyang looked at the purple-robed middle-aged man and said indifferently, "Play with him." The purple-robed middle-aged man raised his eyebrows, looked up at the sound wave, and a terrifying divine aura erupted. Roar! Accompanied by a loud dragon roar, a 5-clawed golden dragon appeared in the sky, carrying a mighty dragon aura as it pounced towards the sound wave. Boom! The moment they met, the sky changed color. The sound wave and the 5-clawed golden dragon disintegrated in the void at the same time, destroying everything. Qin Feiyong raised his eyebrows, looked at the purple-robed middle-aged man and sneered. "How long has it been? And you are already so obedient to Mu Tianyang, even taking off your dragon crown and dragon robe. It seems like a dignified monarch like you is just a good-for-nothing." That's right. This person was the monarch of the Black Tortoise World's Heavenly Sun Empire. When the purple-robed middle-aged man heard this, he became angry and shouted, "Cut the crap! Let's fight!" "As you wish." Qin Feiyang's eyes turned cold, took a step forward, and began to fight with the purple-robed middle-aged man. Bang, bang, bang. Boom, boom, boom. Every time they attacked, whether it was Qin Feiyong or the purple-robed middle-aged man, they were merciless. Although Qin Feiyong had not seen the purple-robed middle-aged man's strength and means before he had heard of it, it was said that he was a rank 10 pseudo-god, and once the demon mark was removed, he would step into the war god realm. It could be said that this person was very strong, but Qin Feiyong was not afraid at all. Although the purple-robed, middle-aged man's cultivation was higher than his, he had an absolute advantage in terms of physical strength, because his body had been refined by the essence of the god's flesh. As the battle became more and more intense, the purple-robed, middle-aged man became more and more shocked. A person who had just stepped into the pseudo-god realm not long ago actually had such terrifying combat strength? Could it be that even Mu Tianyang was afraid of him? Boom! The purple-robed, middle-aged man's eyes flashed with killing intent, and a golden pseudo-god force suddenly appeared in his palm. He thought that Qin Feiyong would not be able to react in time. However, Qin Feiyong immediately sensed it, and a golden light also gushed out from his palm. Return formula. Ah! The purple-robed middle-aged man immediately screamed as his arm shattered and blood stained the sky. The 6-word divine formula again. Mu Tianyang murmured. Is this the extent of his strength? The purple-robed middle-aged man was extremely shocked. He was not unfamiliar with the name Qin Feiyong, but this was the first time he fought with Qin Feiyong. Swish! Mu Tianyang waved his hand again, and 4 figures appeared. These 4 people, some tall and some short, some fat and some thin, all looked middle-aged, wearing a python robe and exuding a terrifying aura. Mu Tianyang said, "For great divine overlords, go help him." Yes, the 5 of them received the order, and with a monstrous aura, they immediately charged toward Qin Feiyong. For great divine overlords? Qin Feiyong's eyes flashed. He remembered that Willow Tree said that there were always 8 pseudo-gods in the Heavenly Sun Empire. Among them, Mu He and Yen Shunho were already dead. Mu Shinkong was also at the end of the desert, and was killed by the small beast along with Fatso and the others. Qin Feiyong did not reincarnate him at that time. In addition to the purple-robed, middle-aged man and the 4 great divine overlords, the 8 pseudo-gods of the Heavenly Sun Empire had all appeared. 5 pseudo-gods. Mu Tianyang, you really think highly of me. If it was before, I would definitely choose to escape immediately. But now, killing them is as easy as slaughtering dogs. Qin Feiyong laughed arrogantly, and with the walk formula he was like a war god, fighting the 4 great divine overlords and the purple-robed, middle-aged man by himself. But he did not fall into a disadvantage. The 4 great divine overlords were also shocked to the extreme, like the purple-robed, middle-aged man. They were all veteran pseudo-gods, but the 5 of them together were still not Qin Feiyong's opponent. Suddenly, the 5 of them looked at each other, and retreated at the same time. Divine Emperor Finger, kill. Following closely, the 5 of them raised their arms and pointed their index fingers in the air. 5 golden light beams suddenly shot out and charged toward Qin Feiyang. The terrifying destructive power annihilated in all directions. And Qin Feiyang was stunned. They actually mastered the same divine art? Divine Emperor Finger, could it be that this was an inherited divine art? However, even if it was an inherited divine art, it was useless. In his palm, the return formula appeared again. The golden light flooded the sky and rushed toward the 5 light beams. Boom! The 5 light beams and the golden light were in a stalemate in the air for a while, and suddenly turned in the air, like an arrow, and entered the chests of the 4 great divine overlords and the purple-robed, middle-aged man. Puff! Immediately. Chapter 1695. The 5 of them were sent flying, their hearts filled with shock. If it could even bounce back, then how heaven-defying was the return formula. Once the 6 words formula is out, who dares to challenge it? Qin Feiyang glanced at the 5 of them, his face full of contempt. The next moment, the emperor's statue appeared, its purple-gold divine light illuminating the sky. Streaks of terrifying emperor aura descended from the sky, enveloping all directions. Under the emperor's statue, even the purple-robed, middle-aged man, who was also an emperor, could not help but feel terrified. This is the 3rd move of the divine dragon formula, supremacy of the 9 and 5. Quick! The purple-robed, middle-aged man shouted, placing his hands in front of his chest to form a seal. The 4 divine marquises did not dare to delay, immediately forming the seal and evolving the strongest deity formula. Rumble! 5 golden square seals were formed in an instant. Divine Emperor Seal, suppression of the heavens. The 5 of them suddenly roared. The 5 golden square seals rushed into the sky and rapidly grew in size. In the blink of an eye, the 5 square seals became 5 deity seals that were hundreds of feet tall, like huge mountains, and pressed down on the emperor statue. In front of my ancestor, everything is just an ant. Qin Feiyang's eyes were incomparably cold. As his voice fell, the emperor's statue raised the broken sword and slashed at the 5 deity seals. Rumble! Accompanied by a loud noise, the 5 deity seals were shattered one after another. The broken sword's edge was peerless, tearing the sky and killing toward the purple-robed, middle-aged man and the 4 divine marquises. Mu Tianyang, save us! The 5 of them screamed, frightened out of their wits. In the past, when they heard Mu Qing and Mu Tianyang talk about the divine dragon formula, they did not think much of it. They thought, how powerful could a deity formula created by a junior be? In front of them, Qin Feiyang's ancestor was indeed a junior. After all, even Mu Tianyang was their junior. But they never thought that it would be so ridiculously powerful. However, Mu Tianyang turned a deaf ear to this. The 5 of them were burning with anxiety. Seeing that the broken sword was about to kill, the 5 of them gritted their teeth, releasing a black light from their bodies. Rumble! The broken sword fell. The 5 of them were immediately blasted into the ground below and buried by the mud and rocks. Qin Feiyang smiled coldly. He looked at Mu Tianyang and said, "You are really heartless. You actually watched them die." Mu Tianyang laughed. "What are you laughing at?" Qin Feiyang frowned. Mu Tianyang said playfully, "Do you really think they're dead?" Qin Feiyang was taken aback. He quickly looked down at the ground. Rumble! With a loud bang, the ground cracked open. The 4 divine overlords and the purple-robed, middle-aged man rushed out from the ground. Other than the bloody hole on his body and his wretched appearance, there were no other fatal injuries. What happened? Qin Feiyang was bewildered. Suddenly, his gaze trembled slightly as he recalled the situation when he fought with Mu-He. At that time, Mu-He suffered a fatal injury, but in the end he didn't die. And the reason was that Mu-He cultivated a divine art called the body of God and demon. This body of God and demon could be activated once a day and could block a fatal attack. Mu Tianyang, you've gone too far. We have already compromised and let you lead everyone. You still treat us like this? If it wasn't for the body of God and demon, we would have died in his hands. The 4 divine overlords and the purple-robed, middle-aged man rushed to Mu Tianyang's side and roared angrily. It is indeed the body of God and demon. Another inherited deity formula. Qin Feiyang murmured. He was in disbelief. First, it was the divine emperor's finger, then the divine emperor's seal, and now the body of God and demon. How many inheritances did the heavenly sun empire leave behind? Mu Tianyang glanced at the 5 of them and said indifferently, "Aren't you all still alive? Why are you roaring?" You, the 5 of them, were furious. However, before the 5 of them could rage, Mu Tianyang turned to look at the deputy palace master and Elder Xiong and said indifferently, "How long are you going to stand there? You have to understand that if the Heavenly Sun Empire is destroyed by Qin Feiyang, the Nether Hall will not be able to escape either." The expressions of the 2 men changed instantly. Elder Xiong sent a voice transmission. "Deputy Palace Master, Mu Tianyang is right. We have to work together to get rid of Qin Feiyang." The Deputy Palace Master glanced at Mu Tianyang and then at Qin Feiyang and made up his mind. In the next moment, 7 figures appeared in front of him. The 7 of them gave off the aura of a false god. One of them was particularly eye-catching. He was about 8 meters tall and wore a black mask on his face. He also wore a black robe, making it impossible to see his appearance. However, his identity was extremely shocking. The Nether Hall's Palace Master. The Deputy Palace Master and Elder Xiong bowed. "Greetings, Palace Master." "Palace Master?" Qin Feiyang looked at the Nether Hall's Palace Master, and his eyes narrowed slightly. He actually felt a sense of danger from this person. At the same time, the Nether Hall's Palace Master glanced at Qin Feiyang. His dark eyes were like those of a snake as a bone-piercing, cold light flashed past. Then he retracted his gaze and looked at the Deputy Palace Master and the others. "I already know the situation outside. There's no need to explain anymore. Join forces with the Heavenly Sun Empire and get rid of Qin Feiyang." "Yes." The Deputy Palace Master and the others replied respectfully. Boom! In the next moment, the group of people unleashed their auras. Their divine might shook heaven and earth as they charged toward Qin Feiyang. However, the Nether Hall's Palace Master did not move. He raised his head and stared at Qin Feiyang with flickering eyes. "Kill!" When the purple-clad middle-aged man saw this, he led the 4 divine marquises and charged toward Qin Feiyang ferociously. There were 5 people from the Heavenly Sun Empire and 8 from the Nether Hall. Now, Qin Feiyang had to face 13 false gods. However, his expression did not change. He shifted his gaze from the Nether Hall's Palace Master to the purple-clad, middle-aged man and the others. "There's a path to heaven, but you refuse to take it. There's no door to hell, but you insist on barging in. What a bunch of fools." Qin Feiyang's lips curled up into a mocking smile. The Emperor Divine statue descended from the sky as if a divine king had descended. The broken sword in its hand was extremely sharp as it slashed toward the 13 people. Divine Emperor Seal, Nether Blade. The 13 people looked at each other and quickly performed a divine art. 5 golden divine seals and 8 black blades soared into the sky. The 8 black blades seemed to have been forged from the flesh and blood of a demon god. They released a shocking demon aura. Boom! Clang! The divine seals and blades shot toward the broken sword one after another. Waves of destructive energy rolled out in all directions like a tide. As the last blade slammed into the broken sword shattered with a cracking sound, and the statue also dissipated. Qin Feiyang's body trembled slightly, and a trace of purple-gold dragon blood flowed from the corner of his mouth. The purple-clad middle-aged man sneered, "Your strength is only SOSO." Qin Feiyang said, 13 fake gods working together could only injure me. I really don't know where your sense of superiority comes from." The purple-clad middle-aged man immediately became angry and shouted, "Kill! Tear him into pieces!" The 13 people's auras surged as they shot toward Qin Feiyang like lightning. Ants will always be ants. No matter how many people there are, they can't change your fate today. Qin Feiyang smiled coldly, and a golden light flickered in his palm. However, at this moment, a strong sense of danger came from behind him. "Who is it?" He was shocked and stepped to the side without hesitation. Immediately afterward, he felt something cold pierce into his back. "You're courting death." The sudden sneak attack made him burn with anger. He slapped with his palm. However, this slap did not hit anyone. Instead, it hit the air. That cold thing also left his body. He hurriedly turned his head and saw the Nether Hall Master standing not far away. He held a black dagger stained with purple-gold dragon blood in his hand, and his eyes flickered with a strong cold light. Moreover, he could not sense any aura from the Nether Hall Master at all. He was like a ghost. "It's him." Qin Feiyang was extremely shocked as he asked, "When did you get behind me?" Before, fortunately, he stepped to the side in time. Otherwise, the dagger in the Nether Hall Master's hand would have pierced his sea of vital energy. The Nether Hall Master did not answer. At this moment, the purple-clad middle-aged man and the others also charged over. He did not have time to think. He immediately turned around and faced the group. "You've completely angered me." Killing intent surged in Qin Feiyang's eyes. He took out the divine phoenix saber and slashed. "That's Ning Mingi's divine phoenix saber. Why is it with him?" The group's expression changed. The terrifying blade tore through the ground. An elder of the Nether Hall was cut in half on the spot. Blood dyed the sky red. "Retreat!" The purple-clad, middle-aged man shouted, "Retreat!" Qin Feiyang smiled coldly. His false god power surged into the divine phoenix saber. With a clang, the divine phoenix saber erupted with boundless divine light. He used the movement character art and chased after the purple-clad, middle-aged man. He slashed at the purple-clad, middle-aged man's head. Swoosh! However, seeing that the purple-clothed middle-aged man was about to lose his life, the Nether Hall's Hall Master once again appeared soundlessly behind Qin Feiyang. The dagger in his hand went straight for Qin Feiyang's sea of vital energy. "I've been waiting for you for a long time." Qin Feiyang smiled coldly. He used the movement character art and instantly appeared behind the Nether Hall Master. He raised the divine phoenix saber and slashed at the Nether Hall Master's neck. A trace of surprise appeared in the Nether Hall Master's eyes. However, he was not nervous at all. His figure flashed and disappeared in front of Qin Feiyang. The divine phoenix saber missed. Qin Feiyang raised his eyebrows and muttered, "Is this teleportation?" However, in the next moment, a strong sense of danger attacked him from behind again. "What? You ran behind me again?" Qin Feiyang had a look of disbelief on his face. This person's speed was too fast. Most importantly, this person was just like the spirit snake, spirit demon scorpion, and spirit demon spider. He had no aura at all. It was impossible to predict what he would do next. In the nick of time, Qin Feiyang used the movement character art and dodged. A trace of anger appeared in the Nether Hall Master's eyes. Obviously, Qin Feiyang dodged his sneak attacks again and again. He could not help but feel annoyed. "You want to compete in speed? All right, I'll play with you. Let's see who's faster." Qin Feiyang turned around and smiled coldly at the Nether Hall Master. He used the movement character art and took the initiative to attack. In this world, no one can compete in speed with me. It's the same even if you have the movement character art. The Nether Hall Master snorted coldly. Then, the two of them flickered continuously in the void. They did not even leave behind afterimages. The purple-clad middle-aged man and the others retreated to the void in the distance. Their faces were filled with shock. This was because they realized that they could not even catch a trace of Qin Feiyang and the Nether Hall Master. Chapter 1696. Bang, bang, clang. While the two of them were competing in speed, they were also exchanging blows. Every time the divine phoenix saber and the dagger clashed, dazzling sparks would appear. The fact that the Nether Hall Master's dagger could fight against the divine phoenix saber without showing any signs of breaking was enough to prove that the dagger in his hand was also a divine weapon. Moreover, its grade was similar to the divine phoenix saber. Clang, clang, clang. About 100 breaths later, suddenly, accompanied by a muffled groan, Qin Feiyang and the Nether Hall Master appeared in the air at almost the same time. The two of them stood facing each other. Qin Feiyang held the divine phoenix saber. The tip of the divine phoenix saber had already sunk into the Nether Hall Master's chest. Blood was dripping down the blade. The Nether Hall Master's arm was hanging by his side. He was still holding the dagger in his hand. He looked at Qin Feiyang. Even though his life was at stake, his expression did not change at all. "You've lost," Qin Feiyang said. "Yes, I've lost," the Nether Hall Master replied. "Submit to me," Qin Feiyang said. "Why?" the Nether Hall Master said. "Because I'm stronger than you. Because I can help you remove the demon mark." Qin Feiyang said, "Remove the demon mark?" The Nether Hall Master's eyes trembled slightly. His gaze that had never changed finally changed. At the same time, hearing Qin Feiyang's words, the purple-clad middle-aged man, the Vice Palace Master, and the others were extremely shocked. Had they misheard? Qin Feiyang could remove the demon mark? Your cultivation has already reached stage 10. Once the demon mark is removed, you'll immediately become a true war god. Who in the world doesn't want to become a war god? You have this opportunity, but it depends on whether you want to cherish it or not. Qin Feiyang said indifferently. The Nether Hall Master remained silent. He stared into Qin Feiyang's eyes as if he was trying to see if Qin Feiyang was lying to him. "Palace Master, don't listen to him. He doesn't have this ability," the Vice Palace Master suddenly said. "That's right. The giant python once told us that only the Creator and the Beast God can come into contact with the devil imprint." The purple-clothed, middle-aged man shouted. However, the Nether Hall's Hall Master turned a deaf ear to him and continued to stare at Qin Feiyang. Qin Feiyang said indifferently, "I don't want to say too much. It's all up to you." The Nether Hall's Hall Master suddenly retreated. Blood spurted out from the wound on his chest. "It seems that this is your choice." Qin Feiyang swung his divine phoenix blade, and his entire body exuded a monstrous killing intent as he slashed at the Nether Hall's Hall Master. Saber light swept through the sky. The Nether Pavilion's master flickered and instantly vanished. "Let's go and create an opportunity for the Hall Master," the Vice Palace Master roared. Boom! The 13 of them attacked again. Their terrifying divine arts shook the heavens. Whoosh! However, at this moment, the Nether Hall's Hall Master suddenly appeared beside the purple-clothed middle-aged man. "Be careful!" Mu Tianyang's complexion changed as he hastily shouted. "Careful of what?" The purple-clothed middle-aged man and the others were puzzled. However, in the next moment, an unbelievable scene appeared. The Nether Hall's Hall Master grabbed a dagger and stabbed it into the purple-clothed middle-aged man's lower abdomen. Ah! The purple-clothed, middle-aged man immediately howled in pain. Bastard, what are you doing? The four divine marquises roared as they raised their arms and slapped at the Nether Hall's hall-master. The Nether Hall's hall-master pulled out the dagger and instantly appeared several miles away. His eyes were as cold as ever. The four divine marquises hastily protected the purple-clothed, middle-aged man behind them. Hall-master, what are you doing? The vice-palace-master, Elder Xiong, and the others all looked at the Nether Hall's hall-master in shock. Humph! At this moment, Mu Tianyang coldly snorted as he landed beside the purple-clothed, middle-aged man. He glanced at the purple-clothed, middle-aged man's condition before looking at the vice-palace-master and the others. Isn't it obvious? He's already prepared to side with Qin Feiyang. What? Hall-master, you can't possibly believe Qin Feiyang's nonsense, right? Elder Xiong's eyes trembled as he asked. The Nether Hall's hall-master remained silent. The vice-palace-master said angrily, Hall-master, have you forgotten? Qin Feiyang acted against our Nether Hall? The second elder even self-destructed because of this. Yet you're actually siding with him? How disappointing. Yeah, if the second elder hadn't self-destructed, all of us would have died at his hands. Are we really going to let such a blood feud go? Just like that? The Nether Hall's grand elder roared. The third elder, fourth elder, and Elder Xiong were furious as well. Elder Xiong was the fifth elder of the Nether Hall. At that time, they were ordered to capture the willow tree, but they were killed instead. It was the second elder who had self-destructed that allowed them to escape with their lives. They had always held a grudge against the second elder for this matter. However, the Nether Hall's hall-master had never said a word. Those who didn't know him would think that he was a mute. Everyone, the hall-master has made up his mind. There's no need to persuade him anymore. The vice-palace-master looked at the elders as he spoke, and then he looked at the Nether Hall's hall-master and said, Hall-master, this is the last time I'm calling you hall-master. From today onward, you're no longer the leader of our Nether Hall. Vice-palace-master, isn't this too rash? The hall-master might have been muddle-headed for a moment. Try to persuade him again. Elder Xiong said anxiously. Didn't you see? He's already made up his mind to follow Qin Feiyang. What's the point of persuading him? The vice-palace-master roared. Elder Xiong's eyes trembled. From today onward, I'm the hall-master of the Nether Hall. All of you have to listen to my orders. The vice-palace-master said, This. The elders exchanged glances. What? You're not convinced? The vice-palace-master raised his brows. We wouldn't dare. The elders hurriedly lowered their heads. Don't worry, I won't betray the Nether Hall like he did. I'll definitely settle the blood feud with the second elder with Qin Feiyang. The vice-palace-master said murderously. The elders exchanged glances and smiled. Then they bowed and said, Greetings, hall-master. Ha! The vice-palace-master raised his head and laughed. Then he looked at the Nether Hall-master and said, Tang Hai, from today onward we're enemies. Take care of yourself. So his name is Tang Hai. Qin Feiyang muttered to himself as he turned to look at Tang Hai. There was only one word to describe this person: profound. Previously, Tang Hai had retreated. Qin Feiyang had thought that Tang Hai would continue fighting him. Qin Feiyang had already planned to kill Tang Hai. However, he had not expected Tang Hai to attack the purple-clad, middle-aged man without saying anything. Now, the vice-palace-master had snatched the Nether Hall-master's position in front of Tang Hai. If it were anyone else, they would have already attacked the vice-palace-master. However, Tang Hai did not seem to care at all. His expression did not change at all. No one could guess what he was thinking. Originally, Qin Feiyang should have been happy when he saw Tang Hai's actions. However, he could not be happy now. In fact, he was even more wary of Tang Hai. The reason was that he could not see through Tang Hai. He did not know if Tang Hai was really going to follow him, or was he just putting on an act in front of him to make him careless and then attack him. As a result, he did not dare to move now. The scene fell into dead silence. Suddenly, Tang Hai disappeared again. In an instant, he landed beside the Vice Palace Master and mercilessly stabbed his dagger into the Vice Palace Master's chi. The Vice Palace Master's cultivation was crippled on the spot. Elder Xiong quickly supported the Vice Palace Master. The Vice Palace Master looked at the wound on his lower abdomen and immediately roared in exasperation. "Did you see that? He even attacked me. He has completely betrayed us." Elder Xiong roared angrily, "Tang Hai, you bastard. We'll break off all ties with you." Qin Feiyang looked at Tang Hai with flickering eyes. Suddenly, he took a step forward, held the divine phoenix saber, and charged toward Mu Tianyang and the others. "Qin Feiyang, I'll fight you to the death." The Nether Pavilion's third elder let out a fierce roar and charged towards Qin Feiyang like a mad beast. Boom! In the next moment, his physical body exploded in the void. A wave of qi that could destroy the world suddenly emerged and spread out in all directions, covering the sky and covering the earth. Qin Feiyang's expression changed. Mu Tianyang, the 4 divine marquises, and the purple-clad middle-aged man were also shocked. Even Elder Xiong and the others from the Nether Pavilion, including Tang Hai, did not expect the third elder to self-destruct. The group of people were caught off guard. The destructive energy instantly drowned them. After Qin Feiyang came to his senses, he immediately activated his armor, turned around, and fled. With the dual defense of the armor, the battle formula, and the travel formula, he was soon out of danger. Tang Hai once again displayed that strange speed, disappearing without a trace like lightning. At the same time, Mu Tianyang did not dare to delay for a moment. He immediately led the 4 divine marquises, the purple-clad, middle-aged man, and the people from the Nether Pavilion into the spatial, divine item. In the blink of an eye, there was not even a shadow left. Only the ancient castle and the blood blade were still fighting in the sky. Rumble. Crack. This was not the first time a fake god self-destructed. It was not an exaggeration to say that it was destructive. A large part of the void was destroyed. The earth was even more fragmented. The air was filled with a tragic atmosphere. In the distance, Qin Feiyang stood in the void, his eyes filled with fear. Even with the dual defense of the armor and the battle formula, his body was still covered in blood. "I've never trusted someone. This is the first time. Don't let me down." Suddenly, a cold voice sounded behind him. Qin Feiyang shuddered and hurriedly turned his head to see Tang Hai, standing 3 meters behind him. His eyes were like the god of death, with a ruthless coldness. For Tang Hai, this distance was enough to end a person's life in an instant. At this moment, Tang Hai's body was also covered in wounds, like a bloody man. The mask on his face was also shattered, but it was not completely broken, so it was impossible to see his true face. "Thank you for your trust. I swear in the name of my ancestors that I'm not lying to you. But next time, can you not suddenly appear behind me?" Qin Feiyang was quite angry. A person could scare another to death if they tried to scare another. But Tang Hai was silent. He looked up at the ancient castle and the blood blade, his eyes dead silent. Qin Feiyang raised his eyebrows and also looked up at the ancient castle and the blood blade. After fighting for so long, the blood blade was still not at a disadvantage. This was enough to show that this item was really a heaven-defying artifact, and it was not inferior to the ancient castle. However, Chapter 1697. Suddenly, Tang Hai, who was silent, said, "The ancient castle did not activate the power of law. Is it because it is afraid that both sides will be injured?" "Both sides will be injured?" Qin Feiyang frowned. On the surface, the blood blade and the ancient castle were indeed neck and neck. But in his heart he always believed that the ancient castle would be stronger than the blood blade. because all along the ancient castle had never disappointed him. In his eyes, the ancient castle was omnipotent. So when he heard Tang Hai's words, he was somewhat unable to accept it. Even if this blood blade was also a heaven-defying divine artifact, there were still differences in strength between heaven-defying divine artifacts. He did not believe that this blood blade could really be compared to the ancient castle. "I believe you." Qin Feiyang looked at the ancient castle and muttered, then retracted his gaze, activated the walkward art, and rushed towards the place where the third elder exploded. As long as the blood blade was still there, Mu Tianyang was still there. This person, no matter what, must stay today. The power of the self-explosion had dissipated a lot. With the double defense of the armor and the battle-word art, he could barely withstand it. But Tang Hai still did not dare to enter. Qin Feiyang rushed to the location of the explosion alone, scanning the surrounding void, his eyes incomparably sharp. Although he could enter the center of the explosion, he did not dare to release his divine sense, because the battle-word art and the armor could only protect his physical body, not his divine sense. Once released, there was a 100% chance that it would be instantly shattered. "Young master," subordinate has already subdued Xin Bao. Suddenly, a familiar voice sounded in Qin Feiyang's mind. "Old Zhao?" Qin Feiyang stared blankly for a moment before a sneer flashed across his eyes. He looked at the empty space and said indifferently, "Mu Tianyang, I'll give you one last chance. Come out and accept your death immediately." What a big tone. Inside the spatial divine object, the four divine marquises, the deputy palace master, the purple-clothed middle-aged man, and the elders gathered behind Mu Tianyang, looking at Qin Feiyang in the image in front of them, their faces full of ridicule. "Can't be careless." Mu Tianyang raised his eyebrows. "What is it? Don't tell me he can still kill his way in." The vice palace master said, "If it were anyone else, I wouldn't even care about those words. But he is Qin Feiyang. As long as it's something Qin Feiyang says, we can't take it lightly." Mu Tianyang said in a deep voice. The deputy palace master frowned and said, "You're overthinking it." "Shut up." Mu Tianyang turned to look at the vice palace master and said gloomily, "How long have you been in contact with Qin Feiyang? Do you know him as well as I do?" The vice hall master frowned as a vicious look flashed across his face. Obviously, he was very dissatisfied with Mu Tianyang's attitude. After all, no matter what, he was the Nether Pavilion's master now. Scolding him in front of so many people was clearly not giving him any face. However, even if Mu Tianyang realized this point, he did not change his attitude either. He said with a cold snort, "This monarch is telling you if you dare to have the slightest bit of carelessness when exchanging blows with Qin Feiyang, you will die without a burial ground. Are you really not coming out? Then don't regret it." Outside, Qin Feiyang's voice sounded again. Mu Tianyang hurriedly looked over and saw a familiar figure appear beside Qin Feiyang out of thin air. "It's Zhao Tailai from the Vanga League." The vice palace master and the others were shocked. Outside, Qin Feiyang smiled and said, "Old Zhao, they must still be here. Lock onto them immediately." "Yes." Zhao Tailai nodded. His godly aura burst out. Immediately after, divine will emerged and covered all directions. "They're still here." Zhao Tailai's eyes flashed with a hint of a smile. Divine power surged out, and a barrier instantly appeared. Lu Xingqin's space divine item was immediately trapped in the barrier. How is this possible inside the space divine item? Whether it was Mu Tianyang or the vice palace master and the others, they all looked at Zhao Tailai in disbelief. It was actually divine power. This must be a dream. How could Zhao Tailai break through to War God? However, the truth was right in front of them. It was indeed divine power and divine power. Could it be Qin Feiyang did not lie to them? He could really remove the devil mark? Whoosh! At the same time, accompanied by the sound of something breaking through the air, Tang Hai risked being killed by the remaining power and rushed over. Looking at Zhao Tailai's back, his cold eyes gradually filled with tears. This was caused by excitement. Zhao Tailai's breakthrough to War God was enough to prove that the devil mark had been removed. How many years? Even he himself could not remember how many years he had been troubled by the devil mark. At the same time, because of the devil mark, he had suffered and suffered, spending his days in pain and despair. Now, he finally saw hope. How could he not be excited? But very soon, the tears in his eyes dissipated and were replaced by coldness. Qin Feiyang scanned the divine power enchantment, a cold light shooting out from his eyes, and said, "Shatter his space divine item!" Yes, Zhao Tailai nodded. The divine power was like a waterfall, blasting towards the space divine item. Rumble. However, after a while, the space divine item did not shatter. Zhao Tailai raised his eyebrows and said in a low voice, "Young master, this person's space divine item is not low level. With this subordinate's current strength, I'm afraid it will be difficult to shatter it. Try it." Qin Feiyang waved his hand, and the phoenix god blade flew in front of Zhao Tailai. Zhao Tailai's eyes lit up. As a former subordinate of Ningmingi, it could be said that he knew the power of the phoenix god blade better than Qin Feiyang. As long as Mu Tianyang's space divine item was not at the same level as the ancient castle, it could definitely be split open. He grabbed the phoenix god blade and poured his divine power into it. Clang! The phoenix god blade immediately shook and released a world-destroying power. Divine power and the power of a pseudo-god were two completely different concepts. Using the power of a pseudo-god to revive a divine weapon, no matter how many pseudo-gods there were, they would not be able to fully revive it. But divine power could. Moreover, even if it was only Zhao Tailai, he could still revive the power of the phoenix god blade to the extreme. As a large amount of divine power poured in, the aura and sharpness of the phoenix god blade became more and more terrifying. Chirp! All of a sudden, a huge fire phoenix rushed out from the phoenix god blade. The world suddenly turned into a big oven. The fire phoenix had appeared. This was the full power of the phoenix god blade. It could be described as destroying the heavens and earth. Mu Tianyang, what do we do now? The vice palace master and the others, the 4 divine marquises, and the purple-robed middle-aged man all looked at Mu Tianyang with fear. War god! A war god had appeared. Even if there were hundreds or thousands of pseudo-gods, they would not be enough to kill Zhao Tailai, let alone a dozen or so pseudo-gods. Not to mention, in Zhao Tailai's hands, there was still a divine weapon that had given birth to a spirit. Mu Tianyang clenched his fists, his palms sweating as he stared at the scene in front of him in silence. Although his facial features could not be seen clearly, it was not difficult to see from his clenched fists that he was very nervous at this moment. "Shatter for me!" Outside, Zhao Tailai roared as he raised the phoenix god blade and slashed in the air. A terrifying blade light suddenly tore through the sky and slashed towards the space divine item. Swoosh! At this moment, Mu Tianyang appeared out of thin air and immediately waved his hand. Clang! The blood blade that collided with the ancient castle in the sky immediately dropped the ancient castle and broke through the air. In an instant, the blood blade was placed in front of Mu Tianyang. The blade light struck the blood blade, and with a loud bang, the ground was crazily shattered. However, the blade light was instantly disintegrated. Zhao Tailai's gaze trembled as he stared at the blood blade in shock and said, "Young master, what kind of divine weapon is this?" "A heaven-defying divine weapon." Qin Feiyang's face darkened. Boom! The ancient castle also carried a terrifying aura as it descended above Qin Feiyang's head. Mu Tianyang glanced at Zhao Tailai, then looked at Qin Feiyang and said, "Brother Qin, is there a need for us to fight to the death?" "Of course. Qin Feiyang's eyes were filled with killing intent as he shouted, "Old Zhao, kill!" He grabbed the ancient castle and used the Xing character art to attack Mu Tianyang. Mu Tianyang immediately grabbed the dagger and faced Qin Feiyang. Clang! The two divine weapons collided and sparks flew everywhere. Both of them retreated a few feet. However, Qin Feiyang still had a helper. Zhao Tai held the Phoenix God blade and took the opportunity to rush to Mu Tianyang's side and slashed with his blade. Boom! Mu Tianyang's real body immediately collapsed, and the Phoenix God blade's light shattered a large portion of his divine sense. There were at least a few hundred strands. Mu Tianyang was furious. He roared, "You're courting death!" His divine sense wrapped around the blood blade and attacked Zhao Tailai like a venomous snake. Zhao Tailai did not take it head-on and retreated quickly. The blood blade was too terrifying and could very well destroy the Phoenix God blade. At the same time that Mu Tianyang attacked Zhao Tailai, Qin Feiyang's eyes flashed coldly. He used the Xing character art and rushed behind Mu Tianyang. He raised the ancient castle and smashed it on Mu Tianyang's divine sense. Boom! Another few hundred strands of divine sense were destroyed on the spot. Mu Tianyang was furious. He roared, "Qin Feiyang, are you done yet?" "Not yet." Qin Feiyang smiled coldly and joined forces with Zhao Tailai to destroy more than 2,000 strands of Mu Tianyang's divine sense. Mu Tianyang was about to condense his divine sense. Right now, his divine sense had already reached more than 90,000 strands. More than 2,000 strands of divine sense, compared to more than 90,000 strands of divine sense, was actually nothing. But he was afraid, because if this continued, his divine sense would be destroyed by Qin Feiyang sooner or later. But now, with Zhao Tailai, he did not dare to hide in the spatial divine object, because he was not confident that the spatial divine object could withstand the bombardment of the Phoenix God blade. He did not dare to let the 4 divine marquises come out to help, because Zhao Tailai alone was enough to kill all of them. Could it be that I, Mu Tianyang, have really walked on the path? He was unwilling. Back then, Qin Feiyang was like a grasshopper in his eyes. But now he was being forced into a desperate situation by Qin Feiyang. "No, I can't die." "Bloodblade, quickly activate your power of law," Mu Tianyang roared. Clang! The blood blade suddenly trembled, and an invisible force suddenly rolled out in all directions. "Power of law," Qin Feiyang muttered. What kind of power of law did this blood blade possess? The invisible force was earth-shattering, covering tens of thousands of miles. Qin Feiyang, Zhao Tailai, and Tang Hai were also enveloped by this power of law. At first, they did not notice anything unusual, but soon they found that their bodies were slowly shrinking and becoming shorter. Zhao Tailai was the most obvious. The wrinkles on his face were gradually smoothed out, and his skin slowly became glossy. Chapter 1698. What's going on? Zhao Tailai was stunned. This seems to be rejuvenation. Qin Feiyang was suspicious. Rejuvenation. Zhao Tailai was slightly stunned and puzzled. Is this the power of the law? Even if it is, it doesn't seem to be scary. Idiot. Rejuvenation. This is one of the power of the law. Time reversal. Qin Feiyang suddenly thought of a mysterious voice in his mind. Qin Feiyang was stunned and said to himself, "Who exactly are you?" He had heard this voice before. Last time when he fought with the main tower, this mysterious voice appeared. At that time, this person told him that his destiny was to fight with heaven, earth, and the rules of this world. He also said that he was waiting for him to work hard to grow. Because this was too strange, Qin Feiyang had always remembered this voice. Unexpectedly, this mysterious voice appeared again. "Don't worry about who I am. Time reversal is not to rejuvenate you. but to bring you step by step to your death. Didn't you notice? Your current cultivation is also beginning to regress. The mysterious voice said. Cultivation regress. Qin Feiyang was stunned and quickly sensed his own cultivation. At that moment, his face changed dramatically. Sure enough, as the mysterious voice said, his cultivation was quietly retreating. Looking at Zhao Tailai and Tang Hai, it was the same. Age, cultivation. They will continue to regress with the power of the law until finally you will return to a newborn baby and then completely disappear from the world. This is time reversal, the mysterious voice said. Qin Feiyang's eyes trembled and said anxiously, Then is there any way to break it? The way is by your side. Hurry up and work hard. I'm waiting for you to grow. After the mysterious voice finished speaking, it was depressed and never sounded again. He said this again. Qin Feiyang frowned. The last sentence that the mysterious person said was to hurry up and work hard. I'm waiting for you to grow. This time it was again. What was the relationship between this mysterious person and him? Why was he waiting for him? Why was she waiting for him? He didn't have time to think about it. He glanced around and pondered the mysterious man's words. The way to break the time reversal was right beside him. Suddenly, he raised his head and looked at the castle, his eyes flashing. That was right. It must be the castle. Time reversed, time stood still. Yes. It was the castle. It was as if he was suddenly enlightened. The Bloodblade's power of law was to reverse time, while the ancient castle's power of law was to stop time. Once time came to a standstill, time could no longer be reversed, and Bloodblade's power of laws would collapse on its own. Castle, please! In the blink of an eye, Qin Feiyang hurriedly exclaimed. Clang! The ancient castle trembled in the void, releasing a deafening sound. Following closely, waves of invisible energy gushed out. Immediately, everything here was motionless. My cultivation! What's going on? Zhao Tailai also finally noticed the abnormality in his cultivation base. Furthermore, he was just a hair away from falling to the semi-divinity realm. The Bloodblade's power of law is to reverse time, Qin Feiyang briefly explained. So that's how it is. When Zhao Tailai heard this, he couldn't help but break out in a cold sweat. If it weren't for the castle's timely action, he would have fallen off the altar. Tang Hai, who was behind him, couldn't help but feel a chill in his heart. To be able to stop time and even reverse time, the power of these laws was truly terrifying. Zhao Tailai exhaled, looked at Mu Tianyang opposite him, and asked, Is Mu Tianyang frozen now? He should have been frozen, Qin Feiyang said, looking up at Mu Tianyang, only to see Mu Tianyang standing motionless in the void, looking at the castle with eyes full of disbelief. How is this possible? However, before Qin Feiyang's voice faded, Mu Tianyang's exclamation sounded. Not frozen. Qin Feiyang was stunned. Mu Tianyang retracted his gaze, looked at Qin Feiyang, and exclaimed, So this is the ancient castle's power of law. It's really powerful, but speaking of this, the corner of his mouth raised with a hint of ridicule. But what? Qin Feiyang raised his eyebrows. The power of law, mutually reinforcing and restraining each other. Although your castle can restrain my Bloodblade, it is also because of the Bloodblade's power of law. The ancient castle's power of law can't stop us. Mu Tianyang sneered. Qin Feiyang frowned. You're powerful, but I'm not a pushover either. We'll settle this score in the future. Mu Tianyang smiled coldly and immediately took the Bloodblade into the spatial divine object. Without the Bloodblade as an opponent, the ancient castle's power of law also dissipated and swept into Qin Feiyang's forehead, disappearing. Old Zhao, Qin Feiyang shouted. Zhao Tailai nodded and released his divine sense. But at the same time, the Nether Hall's deputy hall master and several elders appeared. The group of people was stunned but when they saw Qin Feiyang and the other two, they immediately showed a look of panic. Die! Zhao Tailai shouted and killed the group of people without hesitation. Don't kill them, Qin Feiyang hurriedly shouted. But it was too late. The group of people who had already fallen into a state of panic immediately self-destructed when they saw that Zhao Tailai was about to kill them. Boom! The destructive aura made even Zhao Tailai, a war god, feel the threat of death. This was because the moment a false god self-destructed, its power reached the level of a war god. It could be said that, at this moment, even an early-stage war god like Zhao Tailai would be fatally injured. Qin Feiyang didn't dare to hesitate at all. He took Zhao Tailai, Tang Hai, and the ancient castle and entered the Black Tortoise world. The Black Tortoise world. Tang Hai scanned the familiar land and was filled with emotions. After going around and around, he ended up back in this place. Zhao Tailai looked at Qin Feiyang and asked suspiciously, "Young master, why didn't you kill them? Are you trying to subdue them?" "I'm not trying to subdue them," Qin Feiyang sighed. "If you're not trying to subdue them, then what are you trying to do?" Zhao Tailai was puzzled. Looking at their expressions when they appeared, it was obvious that they were thrown out by Mu Tianyang from the spatial divine item when they were caught off guard. Mu Tianyang did this because he wanted to use these people to buy time for himself to escape. He also knew that when we saw these people appear, we would immediately kill them. And in desperation, one of them would definitely self-destruct. That's why I stopped you. Because these people are nothing to worry about now. We can kill them after we kill Mu Tianyang. But now, because of your attack, one of them was so scared that he self-destructed. We can't chase after Mu Tianyang anymore, Qin Feiyang said. So that's how it is. Zhao Tailai suddenly understood and blamed himself. Young master, I'm really sorry. Just now, I thought that they appeared to deal with us, so I didn't think so much and directly attacked them. It's okay. Qin Feiyang waved his hand. In fact, Zhao Tailai couldn't be blamed for this, because the situation before was a very sudden situation, and it was difficult for ordinary people to react. You're the master of the Black Tortoise realm, so you can control the Black Tortoise realm to chase after them, Tang Hai suddenly said. Even if we chase after them, we need to know the direction they escaped in. To do this, we can only go out and search with our divine sense. But it's too late to go out now. Qin Feiyang shook his head and sighed. Tang Hai nodded. Although it hadn't been long since the self-destruction, with Mu Tianyang's speed, he must have escaped tens of thousands of miles away. Moreover, with Mu Tianyang's cautious character, he definitely wouldn't keep running in one direction. Since they couldn't know the direction Mu Tianyang escaped, there was naturally no way to chase after him. Zhao Tailai blamed himself more and more. He couldn't wait to go out now and turn the ancient world upside down. He looked at Qin Feiyang and said unwillingly, "Young master, let me go out and see if I can find another opportunity." The self-destruction of a fake god. Only at the moment of self-destruction, when the power was at its strongest, could it seriously injure an early-stage war god like Zhao Tailai. And after the self-destruction, the power would gradually weaken, so it naturally couldn't hurt Zhao Tailai. Go out? Qin Feiyang was stunned and shook his head. I already said that I don't blame you. Why are you still blaming yourself? In fact, even without this accident, it's almost impossible for us to kill Mu Tianyang. Qin Feiyang added. Because of that blood blade? Zhao Tailai asked. I never thought that this person would hide so deeply. A divine weapon with the power of law. I underestimated him in the past. Qin Feiyang sighed. Hearing this, Zhao Tailai felt a little better. Qin Feiyang exhaled and waved his hand, and an image appeared in the void in front of them. And, looking at the scene in the image, Qin Feiyang and Zhao Tailai were stunned. In the image, the deputy temple master and several elders stood together in a sorry state, looking around in horror. Their bodies were dripping with blood. Zhao Tailai was surprised. Why aren't they dead? It's because of the Space Divine item, Tang Hai suddenly said. Space Divine item? The two turned to look at Tang Hai. Yes, because I'm comprehending a divine art, the Space Divine item has always been under the Deputy Temple Master's control. When the self-destruction happened just now, he must have brought the elders into the Space Divine item and avoided the fatal blow. But I think the Space Divine item should have been shattered. Tang Hai said. Shattered? Qin Feiyang was stunned. My Space Divine item can't be compared to your ancient castle. It's just a very ordinary Space Divine item and can only be regarded as a semi-finished product. It can't withstand such a violent bombardment, Tang Hai said. I see. Qin Feiyang nodded in realization. While the three of them were talking, the Deputy Temple Master and several elders in the image looked around and fled toward the southeast. Let's go out and take a look. Qin Feiyang smiled mockingly and drove the Black Tortoise Realm to chase after them. Then he brought Zhao Tai Lai and Tang Hai out of the Black Tortoise Realm and stood in front of the group. Qin Feiyang, seeing the three of them suddenly appear, the Deputy Temple Master and the others were immediately scared out of their wits and collapsed on the ground. You're not dead even after that. You're really lucky. Chapter 1699. Plop! The group of people immediately knelt on the ground, trembling, their faces full of fear. Elder Xiong looked at Tang Hai and begged, Palace Master, please save us. However, Tang Hai turned a deaf ear, his expression extremely cold. It's useless to ask anyone for help. Zhao Tai Lai sneered, murderous intent surging in his eyes. Wait. Qin Feiyang reached out to stop Zhao Tai Lai, looked at Elder Xiong, and asked, Where are the others from the Nether Hall? They're all in Mu Tianyang's Space Divine item. Elder Xiong said. Qin Feiyang frowned and said, Why are the people of the Nether Hall in Mu Tianyang's Space Divine item? Our Space Divine item is too small. It can only hold 20 or 30 people. So after coming to the ancient world, we let the others stay in Mu Tianyang's Space Divine item. First of all, Mu Tianyang's Space Divine item has a time array. It can help everyone improve their cultivation as soon as possible. Second of all, his Space Divine item is of a higher grade. If there's any danger, it can protect everyone. Elder Xiong said in detail. Qin Feiyang said, So, other than you elders, the others are in Mu Tianyang's hands. Yes, Elder Xiong nodded. How many people does the Nether Hall have in total? And how many combat emperors? Qin Feiyang said. The Nether Hall has a total of 500,000 people, and about 50,000 combat emperors. Among them, there are more than 5,000 9-star combat emperors and more than 1,000 9-star combat emperors at the peak. Elder Xiong said, More than 5,000 9-star combat emperors and more than 1,000 9-star combat emperors at the peak. This Mu Tianyang really got a good deal. Qin Feiyang harumphed coldly. Yes, he'll definitely put all of them under his command. With the time array, it won't be long before more false gods are born around him. Zhao Tai Lai sighed. How can it be that easy? Besides, even if they all reach the semi-divinity realm, they won't pose any threat to us. Qin Feiyang said, That's true. As long as the demon imprint is not removed, they will not be able to step into the war god realm. A false god who can't step into the war god realm will never be a threat to us. Zhao Tai Lai smiled. Qin Feiyang nodded and smiled. He looked at Elder Xiong and said, Last question, where is Wang Yuanshan? Elder Xiong hurriedly said, He is also hiding in Mu Tianyang's spatial divine object. Qin Feiyang stared blankly for a moment before he chuckled and said, It seems that I don't need to do anything. His end will be very miserable. He knew very well what kind of person Mu Tianyang was. If the giant python and the fire dragon were still here, he definitely wouldn't dare to act recklessly. However, Now that the giant python was dead and the fire dragon couldn't even protect himself, he no longer had any worries. Wang Yuanshan's end would definitely be the same as the others from the Nether Hall, becoming Mu Tianyang's prisoner, or even cannon fodder. My lord, please spare us. We will follow you like the Hall Master. Look, we are all false gods. We will definitely be of help to you. Elder Xiong looked at Qin Feiyang and begged. The others also had begging expressions. The Vice Hall Master was the same. False gods? With a war god like old Zhao helping me. Do you think I still need false gods like you? Besides, Tang Hai will also step into the war god realm soon. Of course. If you had made the same decision as Tang Hai, I definitely wouldn't have killed you. Unfortunately, you continue to choose to go against me. Especially you. Qin Feiyang's gaze landed on the Vice Hall Master and said, Have you been eyeing the position of the Nether Hall's Hall Master for a long time? The Vice Hall Master panicked. He glanced at Tang Hai and shook his head. I haven't. You haven't? Qin Feiyang shook his head and smiled. If that's the case, why did you announce that you're going to succeed the position of Hall Master in front of Tang Hai? The Vice Hall Master stammered. I was angry, yes, I was angry. I saw the Hall Master betraying everyone. So I did those stupid things in a fit of anger. Is that so? Qin Feiyang looked at him playfully. Yes. The Vice Hall Master nodded. Shut up. Qin Feiyang yelled and sneered. What kind of person haven't I seen in this world? Even though I don't know you, I can tell you're a typical hypocrite just by looking at your behavior. I'm not. The Vice Hall Master roared. Whoosh! But suddenly, Tang Hai silently appeared behind the Vice Palace Master and coldly said, Qin Feiyang doesn't understand you, but I do. Since a long time ago, I had already seen that you were an ambitious person. It was only because I saw that you still had some value that I didn't make a move on you. Hall Master! The Vice Hall Master's eyes trembled. He quickly turned to Tang Hai and wanted to explain. But Tang Hai didn't give him a chance to explain. Just as the Vice Hall Master turned around, he grabbed the dagger and stabbed it into the Vice Hall Master's skull. Crack! The skull shattered. The dagger went straight to the Vice Hall Master's sea of consciousness, shattering his soul on the spot. Ah! With a blood-curdling scream, the Deputy Palace Master died on the spot. Hall Master, we know we're wrong. Please don't kill us. Looking at this scene, Elder Xiong and the others couldn't help but tremble and turn pale. Whoosh! Tang Hai's expression was as cold as ever. In a flash, he appeared in front of Elder Xiong. With a light swing of the dagger, Elder Xiong's head fell to the ground. He's gone crazy. We can't just sit here and wait for death. Even if we die, we have to drag him down with us. One of the elders roared, and a destructive aura rushed out of his body. Obviously, he was going to self-destruct. Humph! Do you think I'll give you the chance to self-destruct? Zhao Tai Lai snorted coldly, and a terrifying pressure rolled out. The group of people was immediately imprisoned there. In fact, even his bloodline power had been sealed up by Zhang Xian. They couldn't even move their brows. Tang Hai raised his hand, and the dagger revealed a peerless edge. Bang, bang, bang. One by one, heads rolled to the ground. Bang! In the end, a few headless corpses fell to the ground and blood spurted out. Qin Feiyang glanced at Elder Xiong and the others, then looked at Tang Hai and said, You're quite ruthless. A great man must be ruthless. If you want to achieve great things, you have to be ruthless. Tang Hai said, Ha! Accompanied by a loud laugh, the inner demons appeared from the inner world and looked at Tang Hai. Not bad, not bad. You're to my liking. Qin Feiyang's face darkened and said angrily, Why did you come out to join in the fun? Such a good talent. If I don't come out, what if you kill him? The inner demons laughed. Did I say I was going to kill him? Qin Feiyang rolled his eyes. The inner demons said impatiently, Cut the crap. I like this person very much. Train him well in the future. Do I need you to tell me that? Qin Feiyang glared at him, then looked at Zhao Tailai and said, Go guard the entrance immediately. No matter what happens, don't let Mu Tianyang sneak out of the ancient realm. Yes. Zhao Tailai bowed and then returned the Phoenix God Blade to Qin Feiyang. Qin Feiyang said, You keep it first. This, Zhao Tailai's face was filled with shock. Qin Feiyang said with a smile, I'm just lending it to you temporarily. When you find a suitable divine artifact, you have to return it to me. Thank you, young master. Zhao Tailai quickly bowed and thanked him. Go. Qin Feiyang waved his hand. This subordinate will not disappoint you and guard the entrance. Zhao Tailai said with a serious face, then put away the Phoenix God Blade and disappeared in the direction of the entrance. Qin Feiyang also waved his hand and led Tang Hai and the inner demons into the Black Tortoise realm. Tang Hai hesitated for a moment, then looked at Qin Feiyang and said, I have a question for you. What is it? Qin Feiyang was suspicious. Tang Hai said, Did you use the slave seal to control Zhao Tailai? No. Qin Feiyang shook his head. No. Tang Hai was surprised and said, Then you're not worried about giving the Phoenix God Blade to him. Don't use people you don't trust. Qin Feiyang smiled faintly. Tang Hai asked, Then will you use the slave seal to control me? Yes, because you're more dangerous than anyone else. Most importantly, I don't know you at all. I can't keep a hidden danger by my side. Qin Feiyang said. Understood. Tang Hai nodded, grabbed the dagger, and stabbed it into his lower abdomen. His sea of qi was immediately destroyed. Inner Demon immediately laughed and said, Did you see that? What a straightforward and honest person. The more I look at him, the more I like him. Then you can elope with him. Qin Feiyang said. Elope? The Inner Demons was stunned and said angrily, Do you know how to speak human language? Don't you like him? I'm fulfilling your wish. Qin Feiyang said. Get lost. The Inner Demons glared at him, then suddenly rolled his eyes and said with a smirk, Boy, you're very arrogant, aren't you? What do you want to do? Qin Feiyang immediately became vigilant. I'm not interested in you. Why should I be so vigilant? However, I'm very interested in the mermaid princess and Lin Yi. When I find them in the future, I will elope with them in front of you. By the way, I will kidnap Wang Yu, and let you die alone. The Inner Demons smiled sneakily, looking extremely wretched. Qin Feiyang was taken aback, and his veins suddenly jumped. But before he could speak, the Inner Demons slipped into his inner world. What a bastard! Qin Feiyang shook his head and scolded with a smile. Tang Hai asked with a strange look, Is he really your Inner Demons? It's the real deal. Qin Feiyang nodded. He actually gets along so well with the Inner Demons, Tang Hai murmured. This kid was truly an oddball. Qin Feiyang gathered his thoughts and formed a seal with both hands. The seal of slavery appeared and disappeared into Tang Hai's head. After controlling Tang Hai's soul, Qin Feiyang took out the Heart of Origin and removed the Devil's Seal on Tang Hai. It really works. Tang Hai lowered his head and witnessed the entire process of the Devil's Seal disappearing. At this moment, his eyes couldn't help but become misty. How many years? How much bitterness? Now he finally got rid of the damn seal. Qin Feiyang did not disturb Tang Hai and stood aside silently. Chapter 1700. A moment later, Tang Hai finally calmed down, and his eyes were as still as a pool of water. Qin Feiyang landed on the ground with Tang Hai and said, Take the Spirit Sea pill and get ready to break through. Tang Hai nodded, took out a Spirit Sea pill, threw it into his mouth, and sat cross-legged on the ground. Roar! At this moment, a beast roar was heard. When Qin Feiyang turned his head to look, he saw a golden beast flying over from the distance, like a bolt of lightning. That's right. It was the golden leopard that Zhao Tailai had subdued. Qin Feiyang smiled and said, "Long time no see. Do we know each other?" The golden leopard raised its arrogant head and said coldly, "Ah." Qin Feiyang was stunned. The golden leopard swooped down and landed beside the two of them. It glanced at Tang Hai, then looked at Qin Feiyang and said with a smile, "It's just a joke. Don't take it seriously." "A joke?" Qin Feiyang was speechless. "Well, can you help me get rid of the devil mark?" The golden leopard grinned, and its eyes were full of flattery. "No." Qin Feiyang shook his head. The golden leopard was stunned and hurriedly said, "Didn't Zhao Tailai say that you would help me?" "That's what he said, not me. Go find him." Qin Feiyang said lightly, "Zhao, you lied to me. I'm not done with you. Where are you hiding? Come out and die." The golden leopard roared fiercely. Qin Feiyang looked on coldly. "Where is Zhao Tailai?" The golden leopard looked at Qin Feiyang and asked. "I don't know." Qin Feiyang shook his head. The golden leopard raised its eyebrows and said, "Didn't he go out to help you just now? How can you not know?" I don't know. Qin Feiyang shrugged. "Bastard." The golden leopard was furious. Qin Feiyang suddenly smiled and said, "I was just joking with you. Don't take it seriously." "A joke?" The corner of the golden leopard's mouth twitched, and it said angrily, "How can you joke about such things? Don't you like to joke? Then I'll definitely give you face and play with you." Qin Feiyang said. The golden divine leopard teased, "I didn't expect you to be so vengeful." "Yes, I'm a very vengeful person. So in the future, don't fall into my hands. In short, since you've already chosen to follow old Zhao, then you have to do your part and fulfill your duty." Qin Feiyang said, "This is between me and old Zhao. What does it have to do with you? What a busybody." The golden leopard said unhappily. Qin Feiyang raised his eyebrows and said, "Zhao Tailai is one of my people. Do you think it has anything to do with me? All right. I promise that I will wholeheartedly assist Zhao Tailai in maintaining world peace in the future." The golden divine leopard waved its claws and said impatiently, "Maintaining world peace?" Qin Feiyang's face twitched. This guy really knew how to talk nonsense. He didn't say anything else. He took out the Heart of Origin and helped the golden divine leopard remove the demon mark. "What is this? Why is it such a divine artifact?" The golden divine leopard looked at the Heart of Origin curiously. "It's none of your business." Qin Feiyang waved his hand, and the Heart of Origin entered his glabella and went straight into his sea of consciousness. "If you don't want to say it, then don't say it. What's the big deal?" The golden divine leopard pursed its lips and asked, "Can you tell me where Zhao Tailai is now?" Qin Feiyang said, "He's at the entrance of the ancient world." The golden divine leopard's eyes lit up, and it urged, "Hurry up and send me out. I've never been outside before." Qin Feiyang said, "Answer me first. Can the hearts of pseudo-god divine beasts also remove the demon mark?" The golden divine leopard was stunned and asked suspiciously, "Who told you that?" "That's complete nonsense." "Nonsense." Qin Feiyang frowned. "Think about it yourself. We are also controlled by the demon mark. How can we use our hearts to remove the demon mark?" The golden divine leopard said, "Is the mysterious man lying to me?" Qin Feiyang muttered. He looked at the golden divine leopard and asked, "Then why does the python forbid anyone from harming pseudo-god divine beasts like you?" "This," the golden divine leopard stammered. "Speak!" Qin Feiyang shouted. "Alas!" The golden divine leopard sighed and said, "We used to be the subordinates of the python. It forbade humans to hunt us in order to protect us." "You are the subordinates of the python?" Qin Feiyang was surprised. "Yes. The golden divine, Leopard nodded. Qin Feiyang asked suspiciously, Then why didn't it let you kill me when I went against it? Even it was no match for you, let alone us. If it let us kill you, wouldn't it be sending us to our deaths in vain? The golden divine, Leopard said. That's true. Qin Feiyang smiled. You're not modest at all. The golden divine, Leopard pouted. It's the truth. Why should I be modest? Qin Feiyang chuckled and asked, In other words, all the divine beasts in the black tortoise world used to be its subordinates. Yes, the golden divine, Leopard nodded. That old thing is indeed lying to me. Qin Feiyang muttered. Old thing? Who is it? The golden divine, Leopard asked curiously. Qin Feiyang said, the sealed divine artifact in the soul-sealing valley. It looked for you? The golden divine, Leopard was surprised. You know about it too? Qin Feiyang was suspicious. I've heard of it. According to the python, it used to be a great demon. Countless creatures died in its hands. It's a very terrifying existence. The golden divine, Leopard said. Qin Feiyang said, Then do you know why it was sealed in the soul-sealing valley? I think it's because it offended its creator. I'm not sure about the specific reason. However, you have to be careful. If this demon breaks the seal, I'm afraid we'll all be finished. The golden divine, Leopard said. I know that this guy doesn't have good intentions, so I haven't let it out. Qin Feiyang said. The golden divine, Leopard said. It's best to seal it there forever. Qin Feiyang nodded. Are you done? If you're done, send me out. It wasn't easy to get rid of the python. I have to go and have some fun. The golden divine, Leopard laughed. There's nothing in the ancient world. How are you going to have fun? Qin Feiyang rolled his eyes and said, The entrance to the ancient world is in the southeast. I'll warn you again. Don't go against me. The ancient city they were in was in the northwest, so the entrance was naturally in the southeast. Relax, relax. The golden divine, Leopard waved its claws and said. Qin Feiyang waved his hand, and the golden divine, Leopard disappeared. Not long after, Tang Hai opened his eyes. His aura had already recovered to its peak state. Boom! What followed was a breakthrough. A phenomenon occurred and heaven and earth rumbled. Not long after, Tang Hai successfully stepped into the war god realm. Is this the power of the war god? Feeling the surging power in his body that was many times stronger than before, Tang Hai couldn't help but feel excited. Congratulations. Qin Feiyang smiled. Tang Hai looked at Qin Feiyang, restrained his aura, knelt on one knee on the ground, and said respectfully, Tang Hai greets young master. Get up. There's a rule here. Qin Feiyang said. What rule? Tang Hai got up and looked at him suspiciously. Qin Feiyang said, After breaking through to the war god realm, you can subdue a divine beast as a mount. The divine leopard from before is Zhao Tailai's seat. Mount, Tang Hai murmured and said, Young master, if I really have to choose a mount, I will choose Yu Huang. Yu Huang? Qin Feiyang was stunned. Yes, young master doesn't know, but I cultivate a divine art called the Nether God art. This Nether God art may not be as good as your Dragon God art, but it's not something an ordinary divine art can compare to. Tang Hai said, Nether God art. Qin Feiyang pondered for a moment and said, Your strange speed is because of the Nether God art. Yes, the Nether God art can turn a person into a ghost-like existence. Even if I stand behind you and don't say anything, you won't be able to discover my existence. So, if other beasts follow me, not only will they not be able to help me, but they will also restrict me. But Yu Huang is different. It naturally has no aura. If we join forces, it will be like adding wings to a tiger. Tang Hai said. Is that so? Qin Feiyang nodded and said with a smile, I have no objection, but it depends on whether Yu Huang agrees or not. Why does it have to agree or not? Isn't it your spirit pet? Tang Hai said, "It's my friend, not my spirit pet. From the beginning, I didn't use the enslavement seal to control it." Qin Feiyong said. "I see," Tang Hai said. Qin Feiyong said, "Yo Huang's character is extremely eccentric. It won't be easy to make it follow you willingly. I understand. This matter is not urgent. Let's take it slow." Tang Hai said, "Yes." Qin Feiyong nodded and said, "Then, what's the grade of the dagger in your hand?" Tang Hai said, "It's the same grade as the divine phoenix blade. It also gave birth to a spirit?" Qin Feiyong was surprised. "Yes." Tang Hai nodded. "No wonder it can compete with the divine phoenix blade." Qin Feiyong murmured and said with a smile, "Very good. With you and old Zhao, Mu Tianyang can only run for his life when he sees me in the future. Although Mu Tianyang was once the god of war, he is headstrong and arrogant. It will be difficult for him to achieve great things." Tang Hai said coldly, full of disdain in his words, "Don't say that. He must be extraordinary to be able to become a strong opponent of my ancestor. When facing him, it's better to be careful." Qin Feiyong reminded, "This subordinate will remember." Tang Hai bowed and said, "You've been in the ancient world for a while. Do you know what's here?" Qin Feiyong asked. "I don't know. When the giant python brought us to the ancient world, it ordered us not to run around. So, during this year we have been in seclusion." Tang Hai said. Qin Feiyong said, "I heard from the fire python that there are many divine objects hidden here. We have to go out and take a look." "Divine objects? Fire python?" Tang Hai was doubtful. "The fire python is the giant python's child and is also the guardian of the miracle." Qin Feiyong said, "The giant python's child? Why would it tell you this?" Tang Hai was surprised. "Not only did it tell me about the ancient world, but it also sent me here. This is a long story. Let's go out first and look for the divine objects while we talk." Qin Feiyong said, "Yes." Chapter 1701. After leaving the Black Tortoise World, Qin Feiyong took Tang Hai to search aimlessly in the ancient world. At the same time, they were also looking for traces of Mu Tianyang and his group. Everywhere they went, it was a desolate scene. Staying in such a place for too long would make people unconsciously irritated and depressed. The ancient world at night was even more creepy. There was only darkness and dead silence. So that's how it is. Hearing Qin Feiyong's explanation, Tang Hai nodded in realization. He did not expect that so many things would happen after they left the Black Tortoise World. In a flash, 3 days had passed. Early in the morning, the two flew over a mountain ridge, and their eyes suddenly lit up. Hundreds of miles ahead, there was a very large ancient city. It was even several times larger than the ancient city where Mu Tianyang and the others were hiding. The broken city walls were 50 to 60 meters high, exuding a cold aura. The streets and the buildings on both sides were also dilapidated. But even so, it could not hide its former glory. Above the city gate, one could vaguely see 3 words stained with ruins. Sealed Moon City. The two flew over the city gate like lightning, and a rotten and desolate smell immediately hit them in the face. Tang Hai glanced at the deserted city and whispered, "Young master, be careful. I have an ominous feeling." "I have the same feeling," Qin Feiyong said. The two were especially vigilant, landing on a street in the city one after another, and walked towards the center of the city. The houses on both sides were all in ruins. Broken walls could be seen everywhere. The street where the two was even more silent. Clang! Suddenly, an ear-piercing metallic sound rang out in a house next to them. It was like the sound of a sword being unsheathed. Tang Hai immediately looked at the house, and a shocking cold light flashed in his eyes. "Don't be impulsive," Qin Feiyang hurriedly said, but he was still a step too late. As he spoke, Tang Hai took a step forward and flew into the house. The inside of the house was also extremely dilapidated. The furniture was already rotten and covered with cobwebs. However, scanning the entire house, Tang Hai did not find anything suspicious. The metallic sound that suddenly sounded before did not appear again. After looking for a while, Tang Hai left the house without saying a word and returned to Qin Feiyang's side, shaking his head at Qin Feiyang. It seems that there is indeed something unknown in this city. Qin Feiyang's eyes flashed slightly and continued to move forward. Clang! After walking for about a dozen miles, the familiar metallic sound once again rang out from a house on the side of the street without any warning. Tang Hai immediately teleported and rushed into the house. However, still did not find anything. This strange situation made the two more vigilant. Next, every once in a while, the sound would again. However, no matter how fast Qin Feiyang and his companion were, they couldn't find the source of the sound. It was like a ghost haunting at it. About an hour passed. Finally, the Tang Yi and Tanga A Tang palaces. The palace was over 1,000 feet tall and had a total of over a dozen floors. It covered an area of about half a mile. The walls were riddled with holes and looked extremely dilapidated. Clang! However, just as the Tang Yi and Tang Yi were about to enter the main hall, the familiar sound sounded again, and it came from the main hall in front of them. A cold light flashed in Tang Hai's eyes. His divine power rolled out and rushed toward the main hall. But at the same time, a sword qi swept out from the main hall. It was so sharp that it actually wiped out Tang Hai's divine power and slashed toward Qin Feiyang and Tang Hai. Qin Feiyang was surprised. Tang Hai was now the god of war. Even his divine power could be wiped out? One could imagine how terrifying this sword qi was. He immediately soared into the sky and looked down at the main hall. His brows were tightly knitted together. Tang Hai was also quite surprised. After coming back to his senses, he immediately waved his hand. Divine power roared out and blasted toward the sword qi. With a loud bang, an apocalyptic wave of energy surged out in all directions. In just a moment, the entire ancient city was razed to the ground. Billowing dust and smoke covered the sky. At the same time, Tang Hai was forced to take a few steps back. His eyes were extremely fierce. As he waved his hand, a gust of wind rose and the dust dissipated. Immediately, Tang Hai and Qin Feiyang were stunned. The main hall in front of them was still there. One had to know. The collision between divine power and sword qi destroyed the entire castle in an instant. The main hall should have been the first to be destroyed, but now it was still standing in front of them. Above the main hall, there were wisps of sword qi forming a boundary. It was this boundary that protected the main hall. "Don't play tricks. Get out here!" Tang Hai shouted. The black dagger appeared. Divine power surged into the dagger, and the dagger glowed with black divine light. Streaks of world-destroying sharpness turned into a huge wave, surging toward the main hall from all directions. Clang! But at the same time, a wave of sword qi also surged out of the main hall. The sword qi and the light met again. Boom! The earth shattered and the void collapsed. This time, Tang Hai was forced to take a few steps back. His face was faintly pale. What the hell is inside? High up in the sky, Qin Feiyang's brows furrowed even more. The reason why he said it was something was because he did not sense the aura of humans or beasts in the main hall. The netherworld soared. After suffering one loss after another, Tang Hai was really angry. He waved his big hand. With a roar of divine power, a pitch-black giant sword appeared in the air. The huge sword was more than 10,000 feet long. It was surrounded by black flames and had a destructive edge. This was a divine art. Destroy! With Tang Hai's shout, the netherworld sword slashed toward the main hall. Clang! Another terrifying sword chi surged out of the main hall and rushed toward the netherworld sword. Boom! The two were in a stalemate in the void. I want to see what kind of monster you are. Tang Hai's eyes flashed with killing intent. The dagger in his hand flew out and blasted toward the sword chi. Under the dual bombardment of the netherworld sword and the dagger, the sword chi was instantly annihilated. Then, the netherworld sword and the dagger blasted toward the main hall. Accompanied by an earth-shattering loud noise, the main hall was smashed into pieces. At that moment, a black broadsword appeared in front of Qin Feiyang and Tang Hai. The broadsword was suspended in the air. It was 3 feet long and 5 fingers wide. A divine artifact. The two were stunned. It was unbelievable. All this time it was actually a divine artifact that was causing trouble in the dark. Wait. Suddenly, the two looked at the body of the broadsword. They found that the broadsword was actually incomplete. On the blade, not only were there more than a dozen wide openings, but there were also a few clear cracks on the body of the sword. It gave people the feeling that, with a little force, the broadsword would be torn apart. Such a divine artifact was already considered a scrap. But at this moment, it could actually release such a terrifying sword chi? Furthermore, he didn't see anyone around. If there was no one, how could the broadsword show a state of recovery? Could it be, was it self-recovery? How dare you play tricks in front of me? See how I destroy you. Tang Hai glanced at the broadsword, and a cold light suddenly burst out from his eyes. The netherworld sword and the dagger shattered the sky and slashed toward the broadsword. Clang! The broadsword trembled in the void and turned around to escape. Swish! But at the same time, Qin Feiyang used the move formula and stood in front of it. Clang! The broadsword did not retreat and directly slashed toward Qin Feiyang. The sharpness was extremely terrifying. You have guts to dare to attack me. It seems that a fake god like me can't enter your eyes. Qin Feiyang smiled coldly, took out the ancient castle, and faced it like a brick. Clang! Suddenly, sparks flew everywhere. The broadsword was torn apart immediately. At the same time, within the broadsword, there was a wail like that of a ghost. Qin Feiyang was stunned. Tang Hai's eyes were also full of surprise. Why was there a wail? Just as the two of them were stunned, a black light swept out from a fragment and fled into the distance without looking back. What is that? Is it an artifact spirit? Qin Feiyang looked at the black light, his eyes full of surprise. Tang Hai also came back to his senses. His figure flickered, and in a few breaths he caught up with the black light with the dagger and the netherworld sword. Divine power surged and turned into a cage, imprisoning the black light inside. Boom! The black light frantically bombarded the cage. The cage was distorted. Seeing that it was about to break, Tang Hai controlled the netherworld sword and the dagger, and said, "If you dare to move again, I will destroy your soul." The black light immediately became obedient, floating in the cage, constantly trembling. It seemed to be trembling because of fear. Qin Feiyang put away the ancient castle and rushed to Tang Hai's side. Looking at the black light, his brows furrowed. Tang Hai said, "Young master, it should be the artifact spirit of that artifact." "No." Qin Feiyang shook his head. "What do you mean?" Tang Hai was stunned and looked at Qin Feiyang suspiciously. Qin Feiyang pondered and said, "Its aura is somewhat familiar." "Familiar?" Tang Hai frowned. Suddenly, Qin Feiyang's eyes trembled and said, "It's an undead." "Undead?" Tang Hai was shocked. "Yes, the aura it emits is exactly the same as the undead in the desert of the Undead Mountain Range." Qin Feiyang said, "Undead?" Tang Hai looked up at the black light, his eyes full of disbelief. Qin Feiyang walked to the front of the cage, looked at the undead inside, and said, "I will ask you a few questions. As long as you answer me honestly, I will let you live." The undead seemed to understand Qin Feiyang's words and turned into a blurry black shadow. Although the appearance could not be seen clearly, from the outline it should be a woman, because the outline of its waist was very slender. There were also 2 bulges on its chest. Qin Feiyang said, "After we entered the city, you repeatedly made sounds. Are you warning us not to approach this hall?" The undead was silent for a while and nodded. "Why did you stop us?" "In the hall. There doesn't seem to be anything that interests us," Qin Feiyang said. Hearing this, the undead did not have any reaction. "Speak," Tang Hai shouted, full of murderous intent. But the undead was still indifferent. "You're courting death." Tang Hai waved his hand, and the sword and dagger suddenly fell. "Don't do it first." Chapter 1702. Tang Hai hurriedly waved his hand. The netherworld sword and dagger immediately stopped, looking at Qin Feiyang in confusion. Qin Feiyang smiled and looked at the undead. "Let's talk in another way. Are you guarding something here?" "Guarding?" Tang Hai was surprised and looked at the undead suspiciously. But the undead still didn't respond. Qin Feiyang said, "Don't worry, I'm a man of my word, as long as you're willing to tell me. I'll let you go right away." The undead didn't move. Qin Feiyang didn't rush it and just silently looked at it. A moment later, the undead finally nodded. Qin Feiyang was secretly happy and asked, "What are you guarding?" The undead pointed at the hall. Qin Feiyang hurriedly turned around to look. The hall was already shattered, and there was nothing left. "Wait a minute." Suddenly, Qin Feiyang glanced at the broken ground. Could it be the thing it was guarding was underground? Thinking of this, he immediately said, "Tang Hai, quickly use your inner sight to search the underground." Tang Hai was surprised, then released his inner sight and rushed into the ground. Soon, there was a hint of surprise in his eyes. Qin Feiyang asked, "Did you find something?" "Yes, there's a secret room underground. In the secret room, there's a broken skeleton. Next to the skeleton is a chinquan bag and a rusty axe," Tang Hai said. Qin Feiyang looked at the undead and asked, "Is this what you're guarding?" The undead nodded. Qin Feiyang asked, "Why are you guarding these things? Is it related to you?" The undead was silent for a while, then nodded again. "It's really related?" Qin Feiyang was surprised, then suddenly thought of something and asked in surprise, "Could it be that the skeleton in the secret room is you?" The undead nodded. "No wonder you wanted to drive us away, so you didn't want us to destroy your body." "Don't worry, we won't destroy your body. I'll keep my word and let you go." Qin Feiyang smiled at the undead, then turned to Tang Hai and said, "Let's go down." Tang Hai nodded. Divine power gushed out from his body as he brought Qin Feiyang straight underground. The cage that trapped the undead also dissipated. The undead immediately turned into a black shadow and rushed out of the city. At the same time, from the north, 2 silhouettes streaked across the sky like lightning. It was an old man and a young boy. The old man was in his 60s, and his hair was mottled with white spots. He held a walking stick in his hand, and his body was stooped. He wore black linen clothes, and his aura was unfathomable. The younger one was a young man about 20 years old. He was about 8 meters tall, and was also wearing a black linen robe. His black hair fluttered in the wind, and his eyes were as cold as a sharp blade. The aura of the young man was extremely terrifying too. What about the city? The young man came to the outside of the ancient city. When he saw the destroyed city, his eyes were full of surprise. The old man scanned the void and said in a deep voice, "There are still obvious battle fluctuations here. It seems that someone has beaten us to it." "Bastard!" The young man was flustered and exasperated. His eyebrows were full of hostility. Suddenly, at a certain spot in the void, he caught sight of a black shadow. That's right. It was the undead. The young man hurriedly pointed at the undead and shouted, "Second Grandpa, it's her!" The black-clothed old man's eyes flashed. He took a step forward as if he had teleported. In a few breaths, he stood in front of the undead. Seeing the black-clothed old man, the undead was obviously a little panicked and quickly turned around to flee. Humph! The black-clothed old man snorted coldly. The walking stick in his hand stamped on the void, and a terrifying divine power suddenly rushed toward the undead. "Second Grandpa, don't kill her." The young man hurriedly flew over. The black-clothed old man waved his hand, and the divine power immediately turned into a cage of more than 100 feet, imprisoning the undead. Then he looked at the young man who flew away and asked, "Why don't you kill her?" The young man landed beside the black-clothed old man and said with a sinister smile, "3 days ago I almost died in her hands. How can I let her die so easily?" The black-clothed old man nodded, and the cage quickly shrank. Finally, the cage shrank to the size of a palm. The undead was trapped inside just like that. The young man stepped forward, grabbed the cage, and sneered, "When I get the treasures you left behind, I'll take care of you slowly." Finished. He looked at the black-clothed old man and urged, "Second Grandpa, let's hurry up. Don't let others beat us to it." "Lead the way," the black-clothed old man said. The young man immediately led the black-clothed old man to the location of the main hall. Back to Qin Feiyang and Tang Hai. At this moment, the two were standing in front of a stone door. The stone door was 3 meters high and 1.5 meters wide, exuding a strong and ancient aura. The secret room that Tang Hai had explored before was behind this stone door. Tang Hai took out a black dagger and slashed at the stone door. Crack! The stone door was directly split into 2 halves. Everything inside immediately appeared in front of the two of them. The secret room was about 10 feet long. The skeleton was sitting cross-legged in the center of the secret room. On the ground beside it, there was a Qianquan bag and an axe. The axe, as Tang Hai said, was indeed rusty. Qin Feiyang was about to enter the secret room, but Tang Hai suddenly reached out to stop him. Qin Feiyang looked at Tang Hai suspiciously. Tang Hai, however, glanced at the secret room warily, then entered the secret room and carefully checked it. After confirming that there was no danger, he nodded to Qin Feiyang. "This person is quite careful." Qin Feiyang muttered, entered the secret room, and went straight to the skeleton. The skeleton was missing an arm. Several bones on its back were also broken. Obviously, the skeleton was seriously injured before it died. Qin Feiyang carefully looked at the skeleton's sternum and pelvis and nodded. "This is indeed the skeleton of a woman. It seems that the undead did not lie to us, but who injured her?" The skeleton of a woman and a man were different in some places, and it was easy to distinguish. "It doesn't matter who injured her. What's important is the Qianquan bag and this axe," Tang Hai said, grabbing the Qianquan bag with one hand and the axe with the other. The axe was very small, about the size of an adult's palm. There was a skull on the handle. The whole axe was covered with a layer of rust, and there was no aura nor any sharpness. It looked like an ordinary axe with rust. Qin Feiyang looked at the skeleton again, walked to Tang Hai and said, "Let me see." Tang Hai handed the axe to Qin Feiyang. Qin Feiyang grabbed the axe, carefully observed it for a while, and gently flicked the blade with his fingers. Immediately, Qin Feiyang's face was full of horror. With such a gentle flick, his finger was cut by the axe blade. Buzz! Clang! And at the same time, the axe blade trembled, vibrating with an extremely deep, metallic sound without any impurities. This sound, Tang Hai stared at the axe and Qin Feiyang's bleeding finger, his eyes full of surprise. One had to know. Qin Feiyang had the body of a pseudo-god, and it had been tempered by the essence of the divine flesh. The strength of his physical body could be said to be far beyond that of other pseudo-gods. Ordinary weapons could not hurt him at all, not to mention such a rusty axe. It was rusty, but it could still hurt Qin Feiyang. What did this mean? It meant this was not an ordinary axe at all. Whoosh! Just when the two of them were surprised, accompanied by the sound of breaking air, two figures rushed into the secret room. It was the young man and the old man in black. Qin Feiyang and Tang Hai came back to their senses and looked up at the two. When they saw the imprisoned dead spirit in the young man's hands, their pupils suddenly shrank. They had personally experienced the strength of the dead spirit, which was comparable to a god of war, but it was actually captured by these two people. Qin Feiyang could see through the young man's cultivation at a glance. 9-star combat emperor at the peak realm. But Qin Feiyang could not see through the old man in black's cultivation. Tang Hai said telepathically, "I can't see through his cultivation either." What? Qin Feiyang's gaze trembled. Even Tang Hai could not see through it? Could it be that this old man was a god of war at the initial stage? The young man and the old man in black were also sizing up Qin Feiyang and Tang Hai at the same time. These two people are not simple. That young man has a pseudo-god, and the masked man is a god of war at the initial stage. The most important thing is that I have never seen them before, the old man in black said to himself. Pseudo-god, initial stage god of war, the young man murmured with a hint of disdain in his eyes. He looked at Qin Feiyang and Tang Hai and shouted, "Who are you? How dare you steal this young master's treasure?" "Your treasure?" Qin Feiyang looked at the young man in a daze and said suspiciously, "Isn't this the dead spirit's? How did it become yours?" "If I say it's mine, then it's mine," the young man said proudly. "So that's how it is." Qin Feiyang suddenly smiled. He thought, this young man, an old man, might have some relationship with the dead spirit. But in the end he was thinking too much. The young man was simply trying to snatch it by force. Qin Feiyang turned his gaze and looked at the old man in black. He cupped his hands and said with a smile, "Senior, we are all reasonable people. Everything should be based on first come, first served. This young master has long had his eyes on the things here. Now tell this young master, who came first and who came later?" The young man said. Qin Feiyang looked at the young man and said faintly, "There seems to be a difference between having your eyes on it and getting it." "What? Are you really going to take it for yourself in front of this young master?" The young man's eyes were cold, and he looked at Qin Feiyang playfully and asked. Qin Feiyang's eyes flashed with a murderous intent. He looked at the old man in black and said with a smile, "Senior, is that what you mean? Who are you? Which force do you belong to? Why haven't this old man seen you before?" The old man in black didn't answer, but asked instead, "Which force?" Qin Feiyang and Tang Hai looked at each other. What did he mean? Were there many people in this ancient world? Seeing Qin Feiyang and Tang Hai didn't speak for a long time, the old man in black raised his eyebrows slightly and shouted, "Speak!" At the same time, divine power emerged and rushed toward Qin Feiyang and Tang Hai. "Give an inch and you want a mile." Tang Hai secretly snorted and disappeared in an instant. The next moment, he appeared in front of the young man. His big hand was like an eagle's claw, and he grabbed the young man's neck. "What? So fast?" The old man in black changed his expression. Chapter 1703. Tang Hai grabbed the young man and returned to Qin Feiyang's side. The black-clothed old man's face darkened, and he shouted, "Let him go!" "If I let him go just because you said so, how can I give you face? Actually, I've already given you enough face, because at first I did make a move, and I even respectfully called you senior. But what about you? Taking advantage of your seniority and arrogance. I want to ask, who the hell are you? How dare you be so arrogant in front of me?" Qin Feiyang sneered. This merciless humiliation made the black-clothed old man's face turn green and red. He said, word by word, "Young man, don't be too arrogant." Arrogant? I'm still considered low-key. You didn't see when I was even more arrogant. Qin Feiyong smiled disdainfully, looked at Tang Hai and said, "Give me your dagger." Tang Hai handed the dagger in his hand to Qin Feiyong. Divine weapon. The black-clothed old man stared at the dagger, and his eyes trembled slightly. With his eyesight, he could tell at a glance that this dagger was extraordinary. He finally realized that something was wrong. This time he might have kicked an iron plate. Qin Feiyong took the dagger, glanced at the black-clothed old man, and said with a faint smile, "You said I'm arrogant, right? Then I'll show you." As soon as he finished speaking, he slashed at the young man's arm. The young man suddenly screamed, and his arm was cut off on the spot, and blood spurted out of the bull-sized wound. The trapped undead also slipped out of his hand and fell to the ground. The young man roared, "How dare you cut off my arm? You're courting death!" A cold light flashed in Tang Hai's eyes. He raised his other arm and slammed it on the young man's mouth. Crack! The young man's teeth were shattered on the spot. His mouth was also badly mutilated, and the pain was heart-wrenching. "You'd better shut up, or you won't even know how you died." Qin Feiyong looked at the young man contemptuously, then returned the dagger to Tang Hai. Then he bent down, picked up the imprisoned undead, and asked, "Are you okay?" The undead struggled madly in the cage. Qin Feiyong raised his head and looked at the black-clothed old man. Killing intent flashed in his eyes as he said, "Let her go immediately." "You know her?" The black-clothed old man frowned. "No, I don't." Qin Feiyong said, "I don't know her. Why are you helping her?" The black-clothed old man didn't understand. "It's my pleasure. What can you do about it?" Qin Feiyong grinned. The black-robed old man's face was gloomy as he said, "You'd better figure out who is standing in front of you right now." "Really? Then tell me, who are you?" Qin Feiyong was curious. "An existence you can't afford to offend." The black-clothed old man said word by word, "Can't afford to offend him." "Ha ha!" Qin Feiyong laughed loudly, and a cold light flashed in his eyes as he said, "Then I will also let you see the consequences of provoking me." Old Tang cut off his other arm for me. "How dare you?" The black-clothed old man was furious. However, before his voice died away, the young man let out a painful scream. The other arm was cut off cleanly by Tang Hai. Then Tang Hai glanced at the black-clothed old man, his eyes full of ridicule. "Second grandpa, listen to him. Let the undead go." The young man roared. It was too late for regrets. How could he be so unlucky to meet two people who were as good as him? "You will pay the price." The black-clothed old man looked at Qin Feiyong with a grim expression. With a wave of his old arm, the cage was immediately shattered. The undead escaped and hid behind Qin Feiyong's back. "Let him go!" The black-clothed old man shouted. "Let him go!" Qin Feiyong raised the corner of his mouth slightly and said with a smile, "Do you think I am an idiot? If I let him go, you will immediately attack us. What do you want?" The black-clothed old man said in a deep voice, "Tell me, who are you? Why are you in the ancient world?" Qin Feiyong said, The black-clothed old man was stunned and said in surprise, "You are not from the ancient world. Is there a difference?" Qin Feiyong said calmly. The black-clothed old man looked at Qin Feiyong's expression and said in a deep voice, "You are indeed not from the ancient world." Qin Feiyong said, "I didn't say that. This is just your wishful thinking. Stop pretending. What kind of people have I not seen? You want to pretend in front of me? You are still too young." The black-clothed old man sneered. Qin Feiyong revealed an astonished expression. "This old thing is quite perceptive." He smiled and said, "It seems that you won't tell me. If that's the case, I can only use my own methods to obtain the answer I want." Finished. He formed a seal with both hands. A puppet imprint appeared and entered the young man's head like lightning. Boom! But when the puppet imprint entered the young man's head and rushed to his soul, it seemed to have touched some taboo. A terrifying killing intent suddenly rushed out from the young man's soul. The puppet imprint shattered on the spot. Qin Feiyang's body trembled, and he suffered a backlash. The purple gold dragon blood in his mouth spurted out. What? It's actually the purple gold dragon blood. The black-clothed old man stared at the purple gold dragon blood in horror and roared, "Who are you to Qin Batian?" Qin Feiyang was slightly stunned and said in surprise, "How do you know Qin Batian?" Boom! However, before he finished speaking, the killing intent in the young man's sea of consciousness suddenly emerged from between his eyebrows and rushed toward Tang Hai. At this moment, even Tang Hai felt the threat of death. Without any hesitation, he directly threw the young man away and took Qin Feiyang and the undead. He smashed the stone above the secret room with a punch and rushed to the ground like lightning. The black-clothed old man quickly went forward and caught the young man. He asked, "Are you okay?" "I'm fine, second grandpa. We must not let them escape." The young man said resentfully, "Don't worry, they can't escape." The black-clothed old man smiled and chased out like lightning. The killing intent also rushed into the young man's eyebrows and disappeared. Qin Feiyang. Tang Hai had already rushed to the ground with him and the undead. Qin Feiyang said in a deep voice, "Tang Hai, what was that?" That was the killing intent of a war god, and the owner of that killing intent was stronger than that old man. According to my estimation, he was at least a war god in the Deshang stage. Tang Hai said, "War god in the Deshang stage." Qin Feiyang's eyes trembled. Who were these people? What secrets were hidden in this ancient world? Why did they recognize the ancestor? The fire python said that the ancestor was directly forced to the third floor and had never been to the ancient world. It was reasonable to say that the people here should not know the ancestor. What was going on? Boom! Just as Qin Feiyang was deep in thought, the black-clothed old man flew out from the ground with a murderous aura. Tang Hai's expression changed, and he hurriedly said, "Young master, this person's strength is unfathomable. We can't fight him head-on. What are you afraid of?" Qin Feiyang smiled coldly and took out the ancient castle. "I want to understand all of this. Cripple him for me." When Tang Hai saw the ancient castle, his confidence soared. "Surrender immediately, and I'll spare your lives." The black-clothed old man looked at Qin Feiyang and Tang Hai and shouted. His terrifying divine power rushed toward the two of them. "I'll return this sentence to you word for word." Tang Hai smiled coldly and grabbed the ancient castle. His god power surged into the castle like a tide. Boom! The ancient castle suddenly released a shocking power. The black-clothed old man's body trembled, and he stared at the ancient castle in surprise. Tang Hai took a step forward and directly faced the black-clothed old man's divine power. The power of the ancient castle destroyed the world. With a boom, the divine power immediately collapsed. The black-clothed old man was dumbfounded. What kind of divine artifact was this? How could it contain such terrifying power? At this time, the young man also flew out. When he saw the ancient castle, an indescribable fear suddenly emerged in his heart. Even the guardian of the miracle doesn't dare to challenge the young master. Where did you borrow the courage from? With the ancient castle in hand, the world was mine. Tang Hai was in high spirits and unscrupulously charged toward the black-clothed old man. Guardian of the miracle. The black-clothed old man's face became even paler. He decisively turned around and fled with the young man. Qin Feiyang shouted, "You must not let them escape." Yes, Tang Hai didn't even turn his head as he responded. His footsteps were strange as he chased after the two men. Although I obtained the treasure you left behind when you were alive, I also saved your life just now. We can be considered even. In the future, you're on your own. Qin Feiyang turned his head to look at the undead and said a few words. He then used the walk formula and chased after Tang Hai. The undead turned into a human figure, suspended in the void, as if watching Qin Feiyang's back. A moment later, the undead also turned into an afterimage and disappeared like lightning. His speed is really fast. In the sky above the desolate land, the black-clothed old man fled with the young man. The young man turned his head and looked at Tang Hai, who was chasing behind him, his face full of shock. The black-clothed old man said in a deep voice he should have mastered an extremely terrifying auxiliary divine art. Then can we escape? The young man panicked. Of course. The black-clothed old man smiled contemptuously and said, although his speed is very fast, this old man is not to be trifled with. But that young man really surprised this old man. Young man, you mean the person with the purple gold dragon blood? The young man said. Who else could it be? The purple gold dragon blood is the rarest bloodline power in the world. It is said that only the descendants of the purple gold divine dragon have such bloodline power. The black-clothed old man said. The descendant of the purple gold divine dragon? Could it be that he is the child of the purple gold divine dragon and human? The young man said, most likely. Otherwise, how could he have the bloodline power of the purple gold dragon blood? Do you still remember that there was a person called Qin Batian? The black-clothed old man said, I remember. Although I was very young at that time, many people were talking about him. The young man said, Qin Batian also has the bloodline power of the purple gold dragon blood. These two people must have an unusual relationship. This person is very likely to be the descendant of Qin Batian. The black-clothed old man said. So what if he is the descendant of Qin Batian? The young man was puzzled. You don't understand. Those who have the purple gold dragon blood have extraordinary talent and are all people with great luck. As long as they don't die prematurely, they will become great people. The most important thing is that when Qin Batian entered the ancient world, he offended many people. As the saying goes, the son pays the father's debt. If that person is really the descendant of Qin Batian, we can use him to achieve our goal. Chapter 1704. What purpose? The young man was surprised. The black-robed old man shook his head and said, You are too weak now. There are some things you should not know. I am already a 9-star combat emperor at the peak of the martial emperor realm. I am 1 step away from the pseudo-god realm. Is this still too weak? The young man was not convinced. Is a 9-star combat emperor at the peak of the martial emperor realm that great? Do you know how long that young man has been cultivating? According to this old man's observation, he has only cultivated for 100 or 200 years at most, but he has already stepped into the pseudo-god realm. Compared to him, you are still far behind, so don't be complacent. There are many people who are stronger than you. The black-robed old man reprimanded mercilessly. The young man pursed his lips and said, He has the power of the purple gold dragon blood. Of course, he is faster than me. That's not the point. Forget it. You have too little experience. You might not be able to understand some things even now. After the black-robed old man finished speaking, the divine light under his feet surged, and his speed suddenly soared. In the blink of an eye, he disappeared from Tang Hai's sight. Tang Hai raised his eyebrows and stopped decisively. Soon, Qin Feiyang caught up, glanced at the void, and asked, Where is he? That old man's cultivation is higher than mine, and he also cultivated an auxiliary divine art. I can't catch up. Tang Hai shook his head. Damn it. Qin Feiyang cursed secretly. Tang Hai bowed and said, "Young master, please punish me. This is not your fault." "Why should I punish you?" Qin Feiyang rolled his eyes at him, glanced around the land, and murmured, "This ancient world is really an interesting place." "I don't find it interesting. I just feel that danger is everywhere," Tang Hai said. Qin Feiyang was speechless. He looked at Tang Hai and said, "I am really curious. What kind of face is under your mask?" Tang Hai instinctively touched the mask below. It was broken? He was stunned. Then he remembered that it seemed to have broken when the third elder exploded. He immediately turned around, took out a brand new mask, and put it on his face. From the beginning to the end, he did not let Qin Feiyang see his real face. "You are not a woman. Why are you hiding it?" Qin Feiyang rolled his eyes. Tang Hai said, "My appearance is too scary. I'm afraid I'll scare you." "Lame excuse." Qin Feiyang pursed his lips. Tang Hai did not seem to want to continue discussing this issue. He asked, "What are we going to do next?" "Wait, that old man knows the ancestor. When he sees that I also have purple gold dragon blood, he will definitely connect me to the ancestor. I think that if nothing unexpected happens, he will come looking for me again. However, the next time you come looking for me, there should be a large group of experts around you. Are you afraid?" Qin Feiyang asked with a smile. Tang Hai looked at the castle in his hand and shook his head. Qin Feiyang smiled and took back the ancient castle from Tang Hai's hands. Then he took out the Qingquan bag and the axe. "This axe is definitely not simple," Tang Hai said. "Check your cosmos sack." Qin Feiyang threw the cosmos sack to Tang Hai, then cut the tip of his index finger. Drops of purple gold dragon blood dripped onto the axe. However, the axe did not absorb the purple gold dragon blood. "What's going on?" Qin Feiyang frowned. Was this really just an ordinary axe? Because only in this way could it not be bound by blood. But earlier, the axe had indeed been able to easily cut through his skin. Tang Hai looked up at Qin Feiyang and said, "There are only some medicinal materials, elixirs, and gold coins in this cosmos sack. Nothing else?" Qin Feiyang frowned. "No." Tang Hai shook his head, but his expression suddenly froze and he said, "Wait." Immediately after, he took out a jade box from the cosmos sack. The jade box was the size of a palm, dull in color, simple and unadorned. It looked extremely ordinary. However, Tang Hai, on the other hand, sensed a dense and mysterious energy from the jade box. He glanced at Qin Feiyang and opened the jade box. Boom! Immediately, a majestic energy roared out of the jade box. Qin Feiyang and Tang Hai immediately felt as if they were bathing in a sea of essence. The pores all over their body opened involuntarily, and they felt extremely comfortable. The two lowered their heads and looked at the things in the jade box, their eyes full of surprise. Inside the jade box, there was a crystal stone lying quietly. The crystal stone was the size of a baby's fist. It was gray all over and exuded a hazy glow. That energy was emitted from this crystal stone, and the energy emitted by the crystal stone was full of divine essence. "What is this?" Tang Hai was suspicious. "I don't know. I've never seen it before." Qin Feiyang shook his head and said, "But this energy seems to be absorbable." After the energy entered his body, he could clearly feel that it merged with the soul in his sea of consciousness. It can be absorbed. This energy seems to have the same effect as the spirit congealing pill. It can condense divine sense. No, to be exact, the energy is purer and more amazing than the spirit congealing pill. Tang Hai said. Qin Feiyang was taken aback and asked, "You mean this crystal stone is used for cultivation?" "It should be." Tang Hai took out the gray crystal stone and held it in the palm of his hand. Immediately, the energy in the crystal stone surged into his body. His body trembled slightly, and he looked at Qin Feiyang and said, "I'm sure that this is used for cultivation, and the effect is better than the spirit congealing pill. I estimate that the energy contained in this crystal stone is comparable to hundreds of spirit congealing pills with 5 or 6 patterns." Qin Feiyang was dumbfounded. Tang Hai was talking about the spirit congealing pills with 5 or 6 patterns. As an alchemist, he naturally knew what the concept of 5 or 6 patterns was. The energy contained in this crystal stone was actually comparable to hundreds of spirit congealing pills with 5 or 6 patterns. This was too surprising. What kind of treasure was it? Qin Feiyang took the crystal stone from Tang Hai's hand, and the majestic divine energy suddenly poured into his body, passing through his limbs and bones, and finally gathered in his sea of consciousness and poured into his soul. Sure enough, as Tang Hai said, the energy contained in the crystal stone was amazing and terrifying, and there were no impurities at all, and it was extremely pure. Even in this short period of time, 3 strands of divine sense were born in his sea of consciousness. Qin Feiyang reluctantly put the gray crystal stone into the jade box and looked at Tang Hai and said, "See if there are any more such crystal stones in your Qinkuan bag." Tang Hai nodded, and after a careful search, he shook his head and said, "No, this is the only one." Such a magical treasure should be something that can only be encountered by chance. Qin Feiyang sighed, "Not necessarily. It's very magical in our eyes, but it may be just an ordinary thing in the eyes of others. After all, our understanding of the war god and above is too shallow. Why don't we look for it again? If we're lucky, maybe we can find a few relics left by the war god." Tang Hai suggested. "Okay." Qin Feiyang nodded. "If there were relics, there might be this magical gray crystal stone. However, what was the deal with this axe?" Qin Feiyang lowered his head and looked at the axe. The edge of the axe was covered by rust, but it was certain that this was definitely a divine object. But why couldn't it recognize its owner by blood? Qin Feiyang's mind was full of doubts. He simply stopped thinking about it, put away the axe, and looked around. "Let's go over there and look." Qin Feiyang pointed in the direction of the old man in black. "First, look for the relics. Second, wait for the old man in black. Killing 2 birds with 1 stone." Swish! But suddenly, a black shadow appeared in front of the 2. "It's you?" Qin Feiyang was surprised. The one who came was the undead from before. Tang Hai looked at the undead warily and asked, "Why are you following us? What's your intention?" The undead was silent. "You don't want to say?" Tang Hai's eyes suddenly surged with killing intent. The undead waved her hand, turned around without saying a word, and rushed to the west. "What do you mean?" Tang Hai was stunned. Qin Feiyang guessed, "Look at her. She should be taking us somewhere." Tang Hai frowned and said, "We'd better stay away from this kind of damn thing." Qin Feiyang was stunned, looked at Tang Hai with a strange look, and said, "Can I understand that you are afraid of the undead?" "How is that possible? I am the god of war. Why would I be afraid of a mere undead?" Tang Hai said angrily, "You confessed without being pressed. If you are not afraid, why are you so agitated?" Qin Feiyang smiled jokingly. Tang Hai lowered his head in embarrassment. "Well, although the undead is an ominous thing, this one seems to have no malice. Let's follow and have a look." Qin Feiyang smiled. "Okay." Tang Hai nodded. He could only bite the bullet. Otherwise, he would definitely be laughed at by Qin Feiyang. Tang Hai waved his hand and quickly caught up with the undead with Qin Feiyang, but they always kept a distance. Time flew by. Night fell. The whole ancient world gradually fell into deep darkness. Tang Hai also lost his patience. He looked at the undead and said, "Where are you taking us?" The undead suddenly stopped. Tang Hai quivered and immediately stopped. He took Qin Feiyang and retreated a few steps. His expression was full of vigilance. The undead pointed to the left. Tang Hai and Qin Feiyang were stunned and looked in the same direction. Night shrouded the whole earth. There was dead silence all around. However, with the cultivation of Qin Feiyang and Tang Hai, they could clearly see through the darkness. And just a few hundred miles to the left, there was a huge valley. The valley was surrounded by mountains on 3 sides, towering into the clouds, and there was only one entrance. Looking from a distance, it was full of a mysterious and gloomy feeling. Qin Feiyang withdrew his gaze and looked at the undead, asking, "The place you want to take us to is that valley?" The undead nodded and continued to move forward. Qin Feiyang and Tang Hai looked at each other and immediately followed. But in the face of the unknown valley, Qin Feiyang also began to be vigilant. A few hundred miles was nothing for the 3 of them. Soon, they landed in front of the entrance of the valley. The undead directly took the 2 of them into the valley. The valley was very large, estimated to be a few miles, but like the outside, there was no grass, only desolation. The undead did not stop and went straight to the center of the valley, then lowered his head and stared ahead. Chapter 1705. The pool was very small, only 4 or 5 meters in diameter. However, the water in the pool was very strange. It was actually black. There were no waves in the water, like a dead pool, revealing a bit of strangeness. Qin Feiyang and Tang Hai looked at each other, walked to the pool, looked down for a moment, and found that the water was emitting an unusual stench. This stench went into the nostrils, making people feel dizzy. "There's poison in the water." Qin Feiyang's face suddenly changed. "Poison?" Tang Hai was shocked, took a few steps back, picked up a stone under his feet, and threw it into the pool. Dong! Boom! A stone stirred up 1,000 ripples. The tranquil pond immediately surged with waves. At the same time, a cold and fierce aura, like a volcano, erupted from the bottom of the pool. Tang Hai shouted, "Young master, retreat!" Qin Feiyang quickly retreated, but Tang Hai did not move, staring at the pool. The movement in the pool was getting louder and louder. The waves splashed. It was as if there was a terrible demon sealed in the pool, and at this moment it was gradually awakening. Tang Hai became more and more vigilant. In the palm of his hand, divine power was surging, and he was already secretly accumulating power. Splash! Soon, as a column of water rose to the sky, a black shadow rushed out of the pool like lightning, going straight for Tang Hai's eyebrows. A strong sense of crisis swept over his heart. Tang Hai's eyes were cold, raised his arm, and slapped the black shadow. "Ah!" The black shadow immediately let out a shrill scream, and the figure suddenly collapsed. This is... Qin Feiyang's pupils contracted. The black shadow collapsed, and there was no flesh and blood. It was obviously another undead. Could it be? He looked at the pool, and his eyes flashed. Could it be that there was also an ancient site left behind by the god of war under the pool? Hee! After the undead was defeated by Tang Hai's palm, it turned into a black mist that churned in the void. Release? The man's hideous laughter echoed in the night sky, like the roar of a ghost. "Playing tricks, you're courting death." Tang Hai's eyes were filled with murderous intent, and divine power surged out, and the valley collapsed in an instant. "It's a ghost. How can it be playing tricks?" Qin Feiyang was speechless, but as soon as he spoke, he immediately attracted the undead's attention. The undead immediately avoided Tang Hai and fiercely rushed towards Qin Feiyang. Qin Feiyang was stunned and coldly shouted, "Do you think I'm easy to bully?" After saying that, he took out the ancient castle and smashed it on the ground. "Ah!" The undead wailed again and hurriedly fled in horror. However, at this moment, the female undead who had been standing motionlessly beside Qin Feiyang suddenly soared into the air and pounced at the undead. The 2 undead immediately became entangled in the void. but not long after. All the dead spirits in the pool were devoured by the female dead spirit. This, Qin Feiyang was dumbfounded. Tang Hai was also bewildered. The undead could actually devour the undead? Moreover, they also clearly sensed that after devouring the undead in the pool, the female undead's aura immediately increased. Although the improvement wasn't much, it was still there. In other words, the undead could become stronger by devouring other undead. Did you bring us here just to let us seriously injure this undead and give you a chance to devour it? Tang Hai raised his eyebrows. The undead shook its head. Then why? Tang Hai was suspicious. Qin Feiyang smiled and said, "The reason is under the pool." Under the pool? Tang Hai was stunned. The undead also nodded and gave Qin Feiyang a thumbs up, as if to express its admiration for Qin Feiyang. Tang Hai looked at the pool again and suddenly seemed to think of something. He turned to look at Qin Feiyang and said, "You mean there may also be an ancient site hidden in it?" Qin Feiyang nodded. Tang Hai's spirit was lifted. Qin Feiyang waved his hand, and the divine flame power emerged and poured into the pool. The water in the pool quickly evaporated. After a while, the bottom of the pool appeared in front of the two. The pool could be 50 or 60 meters deep. The bottom was full of mud, emitting a foul smell. A broken skeleton was lying quietly in the mud. The skeleton had obvious traces of decay. It was black and smelled foul. Qin Feiyang and Tang Hai entered the pool and stood above the skeleton. "That's not right. Why is this skeleton black?" Tang Hai was suspicious. "It's poison. This person must have been poisoned when he was alive. After he died, his body decayed, and the poison settled in his bones. Over time, his bones turned black. I think the water in the pond turned black because of this deadly poison." Qin Feiyang said, "Could it be that I smelled an unusual stench in the water earlier? It seems like it was emitted by this poison." Tang Hai murmured, "Judging from the strength of the undead, this person must have been a war god when he was alive. Even a war god was poisoned to death. What kind of poison is this? It's so terrible." Qin Feiyang murmured. His heart was full of disbelief. A person at the level of a war god had already transcended the mortal world and was in existence above all things. Ordinary poisons could not pose a threat to them at all. Qin Feiyang turned his head to look at the female undead, wanting to get an answer from the female undead. But the female undead turned a blind eye to it. From the time they met until now, he had not seen her say a word. This made Qin Feiyang wonder if creatures like the undead could not speak. Seeing that the female undead did not respond for a long time, Qin Feiyang had to give up helplessly. Tang Hai walked around the skeleton for a while, and his eyes suddenly lit up. Immediately, he stretched out his arm, and his 5 fingers were like eagle claws, grabbing the air. Whoosh! Immediately, something covered in mud flew out of the mud. "What's that?" Qin Feiyang was curious. Tang Hai waved his hand again, and the mud was removed. A square iron box suddenly appeared in front of the two. Iron box. Qin Feiyang was slightly taken aback and was about to reach out to open the iron box. "Don't move." Tang Hai hurriedly said, "What's wrong?" Qin Feiyang quickly retracted his arm and looked at him in surprise. There are also a lot of toxins on the surface of this iron black. You can't touch it with your hands. After Tang Hai said that, a wisp of divine power rushed towards the iron black. Then, with a slight movement of his fingers, the iron box opened with a clang. The moment Tai He opened the door, a majestic surge of energy surged out. This, Qin Feiyang and Tang Hai looked at each other. This energy was exactly the same as the energy emitted by the gray crystal. The two of them hurriedly lowered their heads to take a look, and their expressions immediately froze. Inside the iron black, there were actually 3 gray crystals. Whether it was the size or the color, they were the same as the gray crystal obtained in the ancient city. Qin Feiyang came back to his senses, turned to look at the undead, and asked, "You brought us here for these crystals?" The undead nodded. Qin Feiyang frowned and said, "Since you can understand what I'm saying, why don't you speak? Could it be that you were a mute when you were alive?" The undead shook his head. "If you're not a mute, then say something. This way we can communicate better." Qin Feiyang said. The undead shook his head again. Qin Feiyang had a helpless look on his face. He really couldn't figure out what the undead was trying to say. While Qin Feiyang was asking the undead, Tang Hai also took out 3 gray crystals from the iron black. After confirming that these 3 crystals were not contaminated by toxins, he handed them to Qin Feiyang. Qin Feiyang carefully put them away and looked at Tang Hai with a smile. "Including the one from before, we already have 4, but it's far from enough." "Yes." Tang Hai nodded. Although the energy contained in the gray crystals was extremely huge, 4 of them were not enough for Qin Feiyang to break through to the War God realm. Tang Hai pondered for a while, then looked at the undead and said, "Do you know where there are more of these crystals?" The undead nodded. Tang Hai and Qin Feiyang looked at each other with a hint of joy in their eyes. Tang Hai urged, "Take us there at once." "Ahem." Qin Feiyang coughed and looked at Tang Hai. "Old Tang, the undead also have dignity. When you ask her for help, you should be more polite." Tang Hai rolled his eyes and snorted coldly. "If it weren't for the fact that she still has some value, I would have killed her long ago." The corner of Qin Feiyang's mouth twitched. Couldn't he be more euphemistic? He looked at the undead, cupped his hands, and smiled. "Miss, I'm sorry, my friend's character is like this. Please don't take offense." "Miss?" Tang Hai was taken aback. He looked at Qin Feiyang with eyes full of contempt. The undead waved her hand to Qin Feiyang, rushed out of the pool without saying a word, and continued to rush forward. "Keep up." Seeing this, Qin Feiyang hurriedly said to Tang Hai. Tang Hai rolled his eyes at Qin Feiyang, then waved his hand, rolled up Qin Feiyang, and chased after the undead. Qin Feiyang wondered, "Did I annoy you? Why do you always roll your eyes at me? Don't you think it's against your will to call her miss?" Tang Hai said, "Against my will." Qin Feiyang was stunned and puzzled. "Isn't this basic courtesy? What do you mean by against your will?" "Okay, then let's discuss it. Let's not talk about whether she is an undead or not. Just by her age, you can imagine that she must be an old monster who has lived for who knows how many years. And in order to get more crystal stones, you actually called her miss. Aren't you ashamed?" The contempt in Tang Hai's eyes was even stronger. When Qin Feiyang heard this, he looked quite embarrassed. "What's wrong? You have nothing to say." "Hypocrite." Tang Hai snorted coldly. Qin Feiyang smiled, but suddenly he turned his head and looked at Tang Hai strangely. Tang Hai didn't feel anything at first, but after a long time he felt uncomfortable all over. He frowned and said, "Why are you looking at me like that? I remember when I first met you. You were a man of few words. I even thought you were a mute. Why are you so talkative now?" Qin Feiyang said. Tang Hai was taken aback, and his expression immediately became indifferent. He coldly snorted and said, "I just don't like your way of doing things, so I said a few more words." "Ahem. Anyway, you are my subordinate now. Pay attention to your words." Qin Feiyang said angrily. Tang Hai rolled his eyes at him again. "Why don't I have any prestige at all?" Qin Feiyang was quite helpless. In fact, in the beginning, Tang Hai was still very afraid of Qin Feiyang. However, after getting along with him for a few days, he slowly found that this person was quite easygoing. At least, he was not so serious and harsh to the people around him. So, Chapter 1706. Next, under the guidance of the undead. Qin Feiyang found 5 more ancient ruins, one after another. Among them, there were a total of 26 gray crystal stones. Plus the original 4, there were 30 in total. In addition, he also obtained 2 divine artifacts. The 2 divine artifacts were both battle swords, but their level was not high, and they could be considered the most ordinary divine artifacts. As for medicinal pills, medicinal herbs, gold coins, and other treasures, there were naturally countless of them. In the blink of an eye, 5 days passed. Fire Python is not lying. This ancient world is really a place full of opportunities. Qin Feiyang said with a smile as he stood in the air above a mountain ridge and scanned the boundless earth. But don't you think it's strange? Why did the undead bring us to find these ancient ruins? Tang Hai glanced at the undead next to him and transmitted his voice. Maybe it's because she wants to devour other undead. Qin Feiyang thought for a while and secretly said, the 5 ancient ruins that they found these days basically all had undead, and in the end, they were all devoured by this female undead. Her aura was also getting stronger and stronger. I don't think it's that simple. She devoured those undead. It should just be an illusion to paralyze us. Tang Hai said, illusion? Qin Feiyang was taken aback and curiously asked, then tell me, what is her real purpose? How would I know? Tang Hai glared at him angrily and then fell silent. Qin Feiyang smiled and looked at the undead. Miss, let's continue. But the undead stared ahead, motionlessly. Dozens of miles ahead, there was an endless mountain range. Layers upon layers of mountains, extremely steep. Some of the peaks were even more than 10,000 feet high, towering into the sky. What are you looking at? Qin Feiyang and Tang Hai looked up at the mountain range suspiciously. Suddenly, Tang Hai's eyes became extremely sharp, and he shouted, Who's hiding over there? Get out! There's someone. Qin Feiyang was surprised. He didn't notice at all. It seemed that the strength of the person in the dark was not simple. Whoosh! Not long after Tang Hai finished speaking, 2 figures flew out from a mountain stream and entered Qin Feiyang's line of sight, accompanied by the sound of something breaking through the air. There really is someone. Qin Feiyang was shocked, but then his expression froze as he looked at one of them and said in surprise, It's you. That was an elder, dressed in black clothes, holding a walking stick. His hair was white. That was right. It was the black-clothed old man who had appeared in the ancient city a few days ago. That's right, it's me. The black-clothed old man looked at Qin Feiyang from afar and replied coldly. Qin Feiyang's eyes flashed with a cold light. He glanced at the person beside the old man in black, and his pupils suddenly contracted. It was a middle-aged man. He was 7 feet tall. He was wearing a fitting black robe. His eyes were deep. His facial features were sharp, and there were strands of white hair at his temples. His expression was rather chilly, and he gave off an indifferent feeling that kept others 1,000 miles away. And it was this person who gave Qin Feiyang a great sense of uneasiness. Tang Hai said, His aura feels a little familiar. Familiar? Qin Feiyang was stunned. Sensing the middle-aged man's aura, his eyes trembled slightly. It was really familiar. Where had he seen it before? Tang Hai suddenly said, I remember, it's the murderous intent hidden in the young man's soul. That's right. Qin Feiyang also suddenly realized. At that time, the murderous intent that emerged from the young man's soul was exactly the same as the aura of this person. It meant the owner of the murderous intent was this person. The middle-aged man looked at Qin Feiyang, and a smile gradually appeared on his cold face. He said, You are indeed an extraordinary young man. What's going on? Qin Feiyang was surprised. This person didn't seem to have any malicious intent. The middle-aged man said, Little brother, may I know your name? Qin Feiyang took a deep breath and said, My name is Qin Feiyang. Qin Feiyang, Qin Batian, The middle-aged man pondered for a while and said with a smile, "So, you are really the descendant of Qin Batian?" "Yes." Qin Feiyang nodded. The middle-aged man looked excited. Qin Feiyang was surprised again. What was this man excited about? The middle-aged man flashed and teleported toward Qin Feiyang and the others. Tang Hai's face changed slightly, and he quickly stood in front of Qin Feiyang and shouted, "Stop! Don't come near us!" The middle-aged man was stunned and stopped in the void hundreds of feet away. He looked at Tang Hai apologetically and said with a smile, "I was impulsive. I hope brother can forgive me." Tang Hai said in a low voice, "What do you want?" This man's behavior was too abnormal. Logically speaking, when the young man and the black-clothed old man suffered losses in their hands, this man should be looking for trouble. But at this moment, this man was polite, as if he had met a benefactor. As the saying goes, there must be a demon when things are abnormal. Facing this man, he must not be careless. Looking at Tang Hai's vigilant look, the middle-aged man quickly said, "Brother, don't be nervous. I have no ill intentions." "Is that so?" Tang Hai sneered. The middle-aged man nodded and said with a smile, "Let me introduce myself first. My surname is Guo, and my name is Zixiong. This is Guo's second uncle, Guoda." "Guo Zixiong, Guoda," Qin Feiyang murmured. He had never heard of these two names before, but judging from the seniority of the two, this Guo Zixiong should be the young man's father. Guo Zixiong looked at Qin Feiyang and said with a smile, "The reason why I came to you is that I have to confirm your identity in person." "Confirm my identity?" Qin Feiyang frowned. "Yes. You probably don't know. In fact, Qin Batian and I are very good friends." Guo Zixiong said, "What? You are a friend of my ancestor?" Qin Feiyang was stunned. "So Brother Batian is your ancestor? This is really a case of the Dragon King's temple being washed away by the flood." Guo Zixiong laughed loudly. "What's going on?" Qin Feiyang asked. Guo Zixiong seemed to be lost in his memories and was silent for a long time. After a long time he sighed, "Your ancestor is not only my friend, but also my benefactor." "Benefactor?" Qin Feiyang was stunned. This was really unexpected. "Yes. Back then I was surrounded by enemies and was about to die. In the end, your ancestor appeared and saved me from danger. Ever since then, your ancestor and I would often gather together and drink to our heart's content. Over time, the two of us became close friends, and we also had an agreement." Guo Zixiong said. "What agreement?" Qin Feiyang was puzzled. Guo Zixiong said, "If one day the descendants of the Qin clan enter the ancient world, if my Guo clan is still around, and if I give birth to a son or a daughter, our two clans will be united by marriage." United by marriage? Qin Feiyang was stunned. Wasn't a marriage alliance a marriage? Tang Hai was also stunned. He looked at Guo Zixiong and asked, "Do you have a daughter now?" Guo Zixiong said with a smile, "I have a daughter more than 5,000 years ago." "What the hell? More than 5,000 years ago?" The corner of Qin Feiyang's mouth twitched fiercely. At this age, she could be his ancestor. Tang Hai was also extremely speechless. He turned to look at Qin Feiyang, cupped his hands, and said with a smile, "Congratulations, young master. Congratulations on having a fiancé." No, it's a fiancé." A row of black lines appeared on Qin Feiyang's forehead. He glared at Tang Hai and looked at Guo Zixiong, saying, "You have no proof. I can't believe you." Guo Zixiong said, "Who said I have no proof?" Qin Feiyang was surprised. Guo Zixiong took out a long brocade box from his cosmos bag and said, "There is a marriage contract in here written by your ancestor himself. It also has my and your ancestor's signatures." "What the hell? There's even a marriage contract?" Qin Feiyang was stunned. He looked at Tang Hai and said, "Go and get it. I'll verify it." "Yes." Tang Hai responded respectfully and walked to Guo Zixiong. Guo Zixiong did not hesitate and directly handed the brocade box to Tang Hai. Tang Hai held the brocade box and went back to Qin Feiyang. Qin Feiyang opened the brocade box. There was indeed a piece of paper in it, folded neatly. "Ancestor, you're not joking with me, are you?" Qin Feiyang murmured, took out the paper, and slowly unfolded it. What entered his sight was the words "marriage contract." Below there were rows of small words. The content was similar to what Guo Zixiong had said before. It was roughly, "Today I have made a promise with Brother Zixiong. If the descendants of the Qin clan enter the ancient world, regardless of whether they are men or women, as long as the Guo clan still exists, I will marry the Guo clan's descendants. This promise will be valid for life. My descendants will abide by it." This, Qin Feiyang was stunned. Tang Hai leaned over and looked at it carefully. Then he transmitted his voice. "Young master, is this your ancestor's handwriting?" "Yes." Qin Feiyang nodded. Although he had never seen his ancestor, there were still many paintings of his ancestor in the library of the imperial palace. He had seen all of these paintings before. Thus, he was able to tell with a single glance that these paintings were indeed written by his ancestor. He looked at the paper and the ink on it. The paper had been specially treated and could be preserved for 10,000 years. As for the ink on it, it did not look like it was just written. Was this marriage contract real? Although the handwriting was his ancestor's, he still did not want to believe it. This was too absurd. His ancestor was such a wise person. How could he leave such a marriage contract in the ancient world? Moreover, he could not even be sure if his ancestor had been to the ancient world. Guo Zixiong smiled and said, "Little brother, I know it's hard for you to accept now, but this is the truth." Qin Feiyang frowned, put the marriage contract back into the brocade box, and asked Tang Hai to return it to Guo Zixiong. Guo Zixiong also immediately put it away. "To tell you the truth, although there is this marriage contract, I always thought that it would not be true, because ordinary people can't enter the ancient world at all. But what I never expected was that after 10,000 years, you actually barged in and even let Ji-er and second uncle meet you by accident. Say, isn't this fate?" Guo Zixiong smiled with relief. This fate came too suddenly. Qin Feiyang muttered. Tang Hai secretly asked, "Young master, what should we do?" "I must obey the ancestor's will, but..." Qin Feiyang frowned. Chapter 1707. Wait. Qin Feiyang suddenly frowned. He seemed to have missed something. He thought carefully for a moment, and his eyes trembled slightly. He looked at Guo Zixiong and asked, "You just said that this marriage contract has existed for 10,000 years." "Yes." Guo Zixiong nodded. Qin Feiyang said, "In other words, my ancestor appeared in the ancient world when the miracle opened last time." Guo Zixiong thought for a moment and said, "According to the time, it seems to be after the miracle closed." "After the miracle closed?" Qin Feiyang looked at Tang Hai and said, "I remembered the fire python clearly said that when my ancestor entered the miracle for the second time, he was directly forced to the third floor by the fire dragon. How could he appear in the ancient world?" "How would I know?" Tang Hai said secretly. "What is going on?" Qin Feiyang was full of doubts. "Little brother, do you think this is okay? It will be difficult for you to accept this marriage contract now. Why don't you come back with me first? As for the marriage contract, we can discuss it later," Guo Zixiong suggested. This, Qin Feiyang hesitated for a moment, turned to look at Guoda and asked, "Do you know about the existence of this marriage contract?" "Yes. Why?" Guoda looked at Qin Feiyang in confusion. Qin Feiyang said, "Why didn't you tell me when we met in the ancient city a few days ago?" Guoda suddenly understood and said with a hoarse smile, "Although I saw the purple gold dragon blood at that time, I couldn't confirm your identity, so I didn't mention it. What he said was reasonable, and there was no flaw in it. Qin Feiyang was silent for a moment, then shook his head and said, "This is too sudden. I really don't know whether to believe you or not." "Understandable." Guo Zixiong nodded and smiled. Guo De took out a gray crystal from his arms and asked with a smile, "Little brother, have you been looking for this crystal these days?" "Yes." Qin Feiyang nodded and said in surprise, "You have it too?" "Of course. This crystal is called a soul stone. It's a great help in condensing divine sense. My Guo clan has a large amount of soul stones. If you return with us, I guarantee that you will get a lot." Guo De smiled. "How much is a lot?" Qin Feiyang's heart moved as he asked. Guo De said, "It's a number you can't imagine." Qin Feiyang's eyes flashed as he said calmly, "If that's the case, why don't you give me some now?" Guo De hesitated. "Little brother, you might not know this, but this soul stone is quite rare in the ancient realm. However, since little brother wants it, there's no harm in me giving you some now. Take it as my sincerity." Guo Zixiong smiled, took out a Qinquan bag and threw it to Qin Feiyang. Qin Feiyang hastily grabbed the Qinquan bag and lowered his head to check it. Immediately, a look of shock crept onto his face. There were no less than 500 soul stones in this Qinquan bag. This was truly an unexpected gain. He raised his head and looked at Guo Zixiong and Yi Zichen. One had to be wary of others, but from beginning to end, he didn't find any trace of deceit in their expressions. "Sai, what's going on? Ancestor, can you give me a hint?" Qin Feiyang sighed secretly. "Little brother, there's no time to lose. Let's hurry back. I think my daughter would also like to meet you, her future husband." Guo Zixiong stepped aside and stretched out his hand with a smile. Tang Hai said calmly, "Young master, be careful of any tricks." Qin Feiyang was hesitant. Qin Feiyang, but at this moment, an anxious roar could be heard. Qin Feiyang was stunned. This seemed to be the voice of the golden leopard. Why did it come here? Qin Feiyang hurriedly looked up and saw a golden stream of light streaking across the sky like lightning and landing in front of Qin Feiyang. Who else could it be but the golden leopard? It was panting and its eyes were full of anxiety. Qin Feiyang suddenly had an uneasy premonition and asked, "What happened?" "Something big has happened. Old Zhao is in danger." The golden divine leopard gasped for breath. "What?" Qin Feiyang's body trembled. "Come with me quickly." After the golden leopard finished speaking, it turned around and began to return the way it came. Qin Feiyang's face darkened slightly. Looking at Guo Zixiong and Yi Zichen, he cupped his hands and said, "I'm sorry I have something urgent to deal with. I'll visit again when I have time." After that, Qin Feiyang looked at Tang Hai and urged, "Hurry up and follow the leopard." Tang Hai waved his hand, rolled up Qin Feiyang, and immediately chased after the golden leopard. The undead also immediately turned around and chased after Qin Feiyang and the others. You don't know how to appreciate favors. Looking at the backs of Qin Feiyang and the others, Guo De snorted coldly and turned to Guo Zixiong, asking, "Patriarch, what do we do now?" Guo Zixiong's eyes flashed, and he said in a low voice, "Let's follow and take a look." Swish! Guo Zixiong waved his hand, and the two disappeared without a trace. "Junior Leopard, what happened?" Back to Qin Feiyang. After catching up with the golden leopard, he immediately asked, "That day, after leaving the Black Tortoise realm, I immediately rushed to meet up with old Zhao, as you said. But on the second day after we met up, Mu Tianyang suddenly brought people out and even revived that blood blade. Although old Zhao broke through to the war god realm, he was suppressed by that blood blade." The golden leopard said. Tang Hai said angrily, "What about you? Why didn't you help him?" Who said, "I didn't help him, but that blood blade was too terrifying. In just one exchange, I was seriously injured." Old Zhao saw that the situation was not good, so he secretly told me to come find you. He tried his best to delay Mu Tianyang. The golden leopard said. Then how did you find us? Qin Feiyang asked. One had to know. Before the golden leopard left, he didn't say where he was going. The golden leopard said, It's all thanks to it that I was able to find you. Who? Qin Feiyang was suspicious. With a clang, the divine phoenix blade flew out of the golden leopard's body. Divine phoenix blade. Qin Feiyang was surprised. The divine phoenix blade absorbed your purple gold dragon blood and purple gold dragon chi, so it can sense your location. These days it has been guiding me. The golden leopard said. So that's how it is. Qin Feiyang nodded his head in realization, but his expression suddenly changed and said, I gave the divine phoenix blade to old Zhao for him to protect himself. But you took the divine phoenix blade away. Then wouldn't he have no chance of winning against Mu Tianyang? It wasn't me who wanted to take it away. It was old Zhao who asked me to, because he knew that even if he kept the divine phoenix blade, he wouldn't be able to defeat Mu Tianyang. It's even possible that it would be destroyed by the blood blade. The golden leopard said. It would be a pity if a divine artifact that has given birth to a spirit artifact was destroyed. At this time, a familiar voice was heard. Qin Feiyang was startled. He turned his head and saw Guo Zixiong beside him. What are you doing? Qin Feiyang was suspicious. Your ancestor and I are as close as brothers. You are his descendant, which means you are my descendant. If you are in trouble, how can I just stand by and watch? Guo Zixiong laughed. Qin Feiyang was hesitant. Tang Hai sent a sound transmission. Young master, this Guo Zixiong's strength is unfathomable. Maybe he can really help us. Hearing that, Qin Feiyang looked at Guo Zixiong and laughed. Thank you, senior. Guo Zixiong said, Calling me senior is too polite. If you don't mind, just call me Uncle Guo. Qin Feiyang was startled and nodded. All right, but Uncle can't always call me little brother in the future. It's really messing up the seniority. That makes sense. Then, from now on, I'll call you nephew. Guo Zixiong laughed. Nephew? Qin Feiyang was speechless. This was still messing up the seniority. The title of nephew was usually used by two parents who had a good relationship with their juniors. For example, if Guo Zixiong had a good relationship with his father, then it was natural for Guo Zixiong to call him nephew. But one had to know. Now, the people who had a good relationship with Guo Zixiong were not his father's generation, but his ancestors who were several generations away. Logically speaking, in front of Guo Zixiong, he should still call him ancestor. This relationship was really complicated. Guo Zixiong seemed to see Qin Feiyang's depression and laughed. We are us. It doesn't matter if it's your ancestors. You don't have to worry so much. Uncle is right. Qin Feiyang smiled bitterly. Guo Zixiong said, Your speed is too slow. We'll take you there. Where is it? Qin Feiyang exhaled, threw away the distracting thoughts, put away the divine phoenix blade, and said, The entrance of the ancient world. Entrance. Guo Zixiong and Guo De looked at each other, raised their eyebrows unnoticeably, and then Guo Zixiong led a group of people and disappeared into the sky like lightning. From the entrance to here, Qin Feiyang and Tang Hai took 7 or 8 days, but Guo Zixiong only took half a day to return to the entrance of the ancient world with a group of people. One could only imagine how strong Guo Zixiong's cultivation was. However, at this moment, there was only a lonely stone door at the entrance. There was not a single person in sight. The ground around the stone door was in ruins. Many bottomless abysses covered the land within a radius of tens of thousands of miles, like a spider web. In the air, there were even faint fluctuations of battle. Guo Zixiong looked around and frowned. There was indeed an exciting battle here, but it has already ended. Then he looked at Qin Feiyang and sighed. I'm afraid that your subordinate is doomed. Damn it. Qin Feiyang clenched his hands and blamed himself. It's my fault. I shouldn't have let old Zhao stay here alone. Young master. But before he could finish, a joyful cry came from a chasm not far away. Qin Feiyang hurriedly looked up and saw a figure rushing out of the abyss. Who else could it be but Zhao Tailai? Qin Feiyang hurriedly ran over, grabbed Zhao Tailai's shoulder, and said in surprise, "You didn't die!" "I almost died. If I hadn't run away quickly, you would have seen a corpse now." Zhao Tailai sighed with lingering fear, and then knelt down in front of Qin Feiyang. Qin Feiyang was taken aback and frowned. "What are you doing?" Zhao Tailai lowered his head and said, "It's my incompetence that I couldn't stop Mu Tianyang. Young master, please punish me." "Why should I punish you? This is my fault. I know that Mu Tianyang has a blood blade, but I still let you guard here. This is simply sending you to your death. You should blame me. Get up quickly as long as you're fine." Qin Feiyang bent over and helped Zhao Tailai up. "Young master," Zhao Tailai murmured. Qin Feiyang waved his hand and said with a smile, Okay, don't be like a woman and be shy." Zhao Tailai smiled in relief. You're tuning in to the Thunder Spear YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.